never believed in leaving things unfinished, but that crypt in Section 7 made me reconsider everything I thought I knew about closure. My name is Director Miguel Ortega, and I have worked as a funeral director at Eternal Rest Memorial Gardens in San Antonio, Texas, for 17 years. In that time, I've overseen thousands of burials, handled every kind of family grief imaginable, and learned to keep my composure no matter what walks through our doors. The living need steadiness. The dead need respect. Those are the only rules that matter in this work. The Hendricks family crypt sat in the oldest section of our cemetery, a granite structure built in 1983 when the family matriarch, Eleanor Hendricks, passed away. It was a modest vault by modern standards, room for 6, heavy bronze door, simple engraving. Over the years, 3 more family members joined her there. The crypt hadn't been opened since 2009, when Eleanor's son was laid to rest beside her. In late September, the family contacted us about adding another member. Eleanor's granddaughter, Patricia, had died suddenly at 43. The family wanted her beside her grandmother. It was a reasonable request. We scheduled the interment for a Thursday morning. I assigned 2 of my staff to help with the opening Marcus, our groundskeeper, and young Sophia, who'd been with us for 3 years. We met at the crypt just after dawn, when the Texas heat was still bearable. The bronze door's lock mechanism was stiff from disuse, but Marcus got it open within 10 minutes. The smell hit us first. Not decay, something else. Dry air, dust, and something faintly floral, like old potpourri. Sophia coughed and stepped back. I pulled my flashlight and stepped inside. The interior was exactly as our records described. 4 caskets rested on their stone shelves, each nameplate clearly visible in the beam of my light. Bottom left, Eleanor Hendricks, 1932 to 1983. Bottom right, her husband James. Top row, their son and daughter-in-law. I was about to turn and signal for the new casket when Marcus called from behind me. Director Ortega? Something's wrong with the bottom left. I turned back to Eleanor's casket. The bronze nameplate gleamed in the dim light, perfectly intact. But when I moved closer, I noticed the seal. The rubber gasket around the edge showed a gap, not much, maybe half an inch, but enough. Marcus, grab the pry bar. He hesitated. Sir, are you sure? Just get it. The casket opened easier than it should have. No resistance, no pressure release. The hinges swung smoothly, as if they'd been oiled yesterday. Inside, the white satin lining was pristine. No body, no remains, no evidence that Eleanor Hendricks had ever occupied this space. Instead, folded neatly where her body should have been, lay a cream-colored wedding dress. The fabric looked fresh, despite being sealed in darkness for 41 years. Beside it, a single piece of paper, folded once. Sophia made a small sound behind me. I picked up the note with gloved hands. The handwriting was elegant, old-fashioned, blue ink, slightly faded but perfectly legible. I'm waiting by the gates. Nothing else. No signature, no date, just those 5 words. What does that mean? Sophia whispered. I didn't answer. I was too busy checking our records on my phone, pulling up the original burial documentation from 1983. Everything was there: death certificate, embalming report, casket purchase receipt, burial permit. Eleanor Hendricks had been embalmed by our former director, placed in this exact casket, and sealed in this crypt on October 14th, 1983. 6 witnesses had signed the interment form. The casket had been sealed before placement. Maybe someone moved her? Marcus suggested. Family transfer? I scrolled through every record we had. No transfer requests, no exhumation permits, no disturbance reports. The crypt had been locked continuously since 2009. Check the other caskets, I said quietly. Marcus and Sophia helped me examine each one. Her husband's casket sealed, undisturbed. Their son's casket sealed, undisturbed. The daughter-in-law's casket sealed, undisturbed. Only Eleanor's was empty. I stepped outside and called the family. Patricia's daughter, Rebecca, answered on the second ring. Rebecca, I need to ask you something. Was your great-grandmother Eleanor ever moved from the family crypt? Silence. Then, no. Why would she be? She's been there since I was a baby. You're certain? Director Ortega, what's going on? I explained carefully, professionally, the empty casket, the dress, the note. Rebecca's voice shifted from confusion to something harder to identify. Not quite fear, something older than that. The gates, she said softly. My grandmother used to say that. Eleanor always told her children she'd be waiting by the gates when their time came. It was her way of talking about heaven, I think. Did she ever mention the wedding dress? She was buried in it. I've seen the photos. My mother insisted on it, said it was what Eleanor wanted. After Rebecca hung up, I stood outside the crypt for a long time. The morning sun had climbed higher, baking the grass, making the granite shimmer with heat. Inside that cool darkness, an empty casket waited with a dress that shouldn't exist and a note that made no sense. We proceeded with Patricia's interment. The family never asked to see Eleanor's casket. I never mentioned what we'd found. The crypt was resealed that afternoon. I kept the note. I'm not sure why. It sits in my desk drawer now, beneath a stack of blank death certificates. Sometimes, late at night when I'm finishing paperwork, I'll take it out and read those 5 words again. I'm waiting by the gates. Last month, Rebecca called to pre-plan her own funeral arrangements. At the end of our meeting, she mentioned wanting to be placed in the family crypt next to her mother, Patricia. Then she paused. Director Ortega, if you ever open that crypt again and my great-grandmother still isn't there, don't tell me. I don't think I want to know where she went. I promised her I wouldn't. But I check the cemetery gates every morning now, just after dawn. I'm not sure what I'm looking for. Maybe a woman in a cream wedding dress, maybe nothing at all. The only thing I know for certain is this. Eleanor Hendricks left that crypt somehow, and wherever she went, she did it in the dress she was married in. The rest is something I've learned not to question in this line of work. Some doors, once opened, should simply be closed again. Some absences are their own kind of answer. The crypt in Section 7 remains sealed, and every morning the gates stand empty. Some graves are never meant to be found, but my job doesn't give me the luxury of looking away. My name is Vernon Ashford, and I have worked as head groundskeeper at Pinewood Memorial Cemetery in Augusta, Maine for 22 years. I've maintained every inch of these 140 acres, mowed around headstones, repaired sinking plots, trimmed the hedges that line the oldest sections. I know this land better than I know my own backyard. Or at least, I thought I did. It was a Tuesday in early October when I found the marker. I was doing routine maintenance in Section 4, the oldest part of the cemetery, where burials dated back to the early 1900s. The grass grows differently there, thicker in some spots, patchy in others, following patterns only the dead know. I was running the trimmer along the fence line when the blade caught something metal. The sound made my teeth ache, that high screech of steel on steel. I killed the engine and crouched down. Half buried in the soil, almost completely obscured by moss and decades of overgrowth, was a small granite marker, child-sized. I pulled my work gloves tighter and brushed away the dirt. The engraving was simple, worn by weather, but still legible. Sarah Louise Carroll, beloved daughter, 1968 to 1971. Below that, a plot number, 142. I sat back on my heels. Section 4 didn't have a plot 142. Our numbering system in that section only went to 137. I'd maintained these grounds for over 2 decades. I knew every grave, every number, every family name. This marker shouldn't exist. I pulled out my phone and checked our digital cemetery records. Searched for Sarah Louise Carroll. Nothing. Searched for plot 142. Nothing. Searched by date range every burial from 1970 to 1972 in section 4. No record of this child. No record of this plot. No record of any Carroll family purchasing burial rights in this cemetery. I called the main office. Denise, our records coordinator, had been with Pinewood even longer than me, 31 years. If anyone would know, it'd be her. Vernon, plot 142 doesn't exist in section 4, she said, her voice crackling through the phone. Are you sure that's what it says? I'm looking right at it, Denise. Well, I'm looking at the master ledger from 1971. No plot sold, no burial recorded. Could be a mistake on the stone itself. Maybe someone ordered the wrong number engraved. The stone's been here for decades. Ground settled around it. This isn't new. She went quiet for a moment. You want me to come look? No. I want you to check if we have any old paper records before everything was digitized. Vernon, those files are a mess. Could take me days, then start looking. I spent the rest of the afternoon clearing the area around the marker. The more I uncovered, the stranger it became. The plot was the right size for a child's burial, small, maybe 3 feet by 6 feet. But the ground felt wrong, too settled, too compact, like it had been undisturbed for much longer than 53 years. By evening, Denise called back. I found something. Old burial permits from 1971, filed in a water-damaged box in the basement. There's a permit for plot 142, dated November 9th. Sarah Louise Carroll, age 3. Cause of death listed as accidental drowning. Who purchased the plot? Parents are listed as Robert and Margaret Carroll. No address, no phone number. The permit's barely legible, Vernon. Half the form is too faded to read. But she's buried here. According to this permit, yes, but there's no corresponding entry in any of our ledgers. It's like someone filed the permit and then forgot to record the burial. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about that small marker. A 3-year-old girl, buried and forgotten. No family visits, no flowers. No record that she'd ever existed except for a piece of granite slowly being swallowed by the earth. The next morning, I made a decision I've regretted every day since. I brought the excavator. It took me an hour to carefully remove the topsoil. I went slow, respectful, treating the plot like it held what I suspected it did. At 4 feet down, my shovel hit something solid. Wood. Dark, water-stained, but intact. I cleared the dirt from the top and sides. A small casket, maybe 3 feet long, the kind made for a child. The wood had held up better than it should have, some kind of sealed hardwood, probably mahogany. Expensive for a forgotten burial. I should have stopped there, should have called someone, but I'd come this far, and something about that empty space in our records made me feel like I owed this child something. Acknowledgement, proof that she'd existed. The casket wasn't locked. The latch opened with a gentle pull. Inside, white satin lining, remarkably preserved, barely yellowed, and in the center, a pair of small white shoes. Patent leather, sized for a toddler, placed neatly together, like someone had just taken them off. No body, no remains, no clothing, no toys, nothing but those shoes. And on the inside of the lid, carved into the wood with something sharp, maybe a nail, maybe a key, were words. Shallow gouges, frantic and uneven. Let me out, let me out, let me out. Over and over, covering the entire inside surface of the lid. Hundreds of repetitions, some carved so deep the wood had splintered. The letters near the foot of the casket were smaller, weaker, like whoever made them had been losing strength. My hands started shaking. I dropped the lid and stepped back. The casket swung gently in the hole I dug, suspended in dirt and shadow. Those weren't old carvings. The wood was fresh beneath the scratches, pale and clean, like it had been cut yesterday. And the shoes, those perfect white shoes, had no dust on them, no decay, no sign of 53 years underground. I filled the grave that afternoon, didn't take photos, didn't call Denise back, just covered that small casket with 6 feet of Maine soil and replaced the marker where I'd found it. I trimmed the grass around it, made it neat, added it to my maintenance route. Denise never found any more records. The Carroll family doesn't exist in any local archives. No death certificate for Sarah Louise, no birth record, no newspaper obituary. It's like she was buried here by people who wanted her forgotten, but I remember her now. Every Tuesday, when I maintain Section 4, I stop at plot 142. I pull the weeds. I straighten the marker. And I try not to think about those words carved in the dark or how fresh they looked. Last week, I brought flowers, white roses. I don't know if that's appropriate for a child who drowned 53 years ago, or if she even drowned at all, but it felt like something that needed doing. The marker's still there, half hidden by the fence line. Most visitors to Pinewood never see it. Our records still show nothing, but plot 142 exists. Sarah Louise Carroll exists. And somewhere beneath that quiet patch of ground, a pair of white shoes sits in the darkness, waiting for feet that will never fill them again. I've stopped wondering who carved those words, or when, or why the wood looked so fresh. Some questions in this line of work don't have answers that help you sleep at night. I just keep the grass trimmed and the marker clean. It's the least I can do for a child no one else remembers. I've prepared hundreds of bodies for their final viewing, but only one ever changed after I sealed the casket. My name is Sloan Whitaker, and I have worked as a mortician at Riverside Funeral Services in Charleston, South Carolina for 14 years. My job is to give families one last moment with the people they've lost to make that moment as peaceful as possible. I take pride in the details, the positioning of hands, the natural color of the skin, the expression on the face. Everything matters when you're crafting someone's final memory. Mrs. Eleanor Vance came to us on a humid Thursday in late August, 76 years old, passed peacefully in her sleep after a long illness. Her daughter, Patricia, was meticulous about the arrangements. She wanted her mother in the rosewood casket with champagne interior lining. She wanted Eleanor's silver hair styled the way she'd worn it in her wedding photos, and she wanted her mother wearing her wedding ring, a simple gold band with a small diamond worn thin by 60 years of marriage. I spent 3 hours preparing Mrs. Vance. Embalming went smoothly. Her features were peaceful, easy to work with. I dressed her in a pale blue dress Patricia had brought, styled her hair with gentle waves, and applied minimal makeup, natural, dignified. At the end, I positioned her hands across her chest in a traditional resting pose, left hand over right, so the wedding ring caught the light. Patricia came for a private viewing that evening. She stood by the casket for nearly an hour, not crying, just looking at her mother's face. When she finally turned to me, her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. "She looks beautiful. Thank you. Would you like a few more minutes?" "No. I've said what I needed to say." She touched her mother's hand briefly, her fingers hovering over the wedding ring. She wore this every day for 60 years, never took it off, not once. I nodded and gave her space to leave. After she'd gone, I performed my final checks. Hair in place, makeup set, hands positioned correctly, wedding ring secure on the left ring finger. I sealed the casket at 9:47 p.m. Our rosewood model has a rubber gasket seal. Once it's closed and locked, it takes deliberate effort to reopen. I logged the time in my notes and moved the casket to our viewing room for the funeral the next morning. Patricia called at 6:15 a.m., frantic. "I need to see her one more time before the service. Please." This happens sometimes. Families second guess themselves. They remember something they forgot to say, or something they wanted to include with the deceased. I've learned not to question it. "Of course, I'll meet you at 7. She arrived exactly on time, carrying a small photograph. "I want to put this in with her. My father, she'd want him there. We can do that. Let me open the casket for you." Breaking the seal took effort. The rubber gasket had compressed overnight, creating a tight lock. I had to use the release tool to crack it open, and even then the lid resisted. When it finally opened, Patricia gasped, not in grief, in confusion. Mrs. Vance's body was exactly as I'd left it. Same position, same dress, same hair, same makeup, but her hands were no longer folded peacefully across her chest. They were pressed flat against the underside of the lid, palms up, fingers slightly spread, like she'd been pushing, like she'd been trying to open the casket from the inside. And the wedding ring was gone. Patricia's voice was small. I didn't answer. I was staring at Mrs. Vance's hands, hands I had positioned myself, hands I had checked 3 times before sealing. There was no way they could have moved. Bodies don't move after rigor mortis sets in. Bodies don't press their palms against casket lids. Bodies don't lose wedding rings that were secure on their fingers. I checked the interior of the casket. The ring wasn't in the lining, wasn't beneath her body, wasn't caught in the fabric of her dress. I checked the floor around the casket, thinking maybe it had somehow fallen when I opened the lid. Nothing. Patricia was crying now, quietly, her hand over her mouth. She never took it off, not in 60 years. "Mrs. Patterson, I can't explain this. Did someone open the casket during the night? No one has access to this building except me and the director. The security system was armed. No one came in. Then where is it? I had no answer. I repositioned Mrs. Vance's hands, folding them back across her chest, trying to restore the peaceful image I'd created the night before. But I could feel the difference in the flesh. Rigor had progressed. Moving her arms took more force than it should have. The funeral proceeded on schedule. I never mentioned the hands to anyone else. Patricia requested we skip the viewing and keep the casket closed. I agreed immediately. After the service, after the burial, after everyone had left, I returned to the preparation room and went through my notes from the previous evening. Every detail documented. Time of sealing, 9:47 p.m. Condition of body, excellent. Position of hands, folded, left over right. Wedding ring, secure on left ring finger. I checked the security footage from that night. The camera in the viewing room showed the sealed casket from 8 p.m. until Patricia's arrival the next morning. No one entered, no one approached. The casket remained perfectly still in the frame for over 10 hours. But at 3:17 a.m., something changed. I had to rewind it 3 times to be sure. The casket didn't move, didn't open, didn't show any external disturbance. But for exactly 4 seconds, from 3:17 to 3:21, there was a sound on the audio feed, scratching. Soft, rhythmic, like fingernails on satin, then silence. I reported the missing ring as lost during preparation, filed it as a clerical error. Patricia was too grief-stricken to press the issue. The funeral home's insurance covered the replacement cost. But I kept that footage. I've watched it maybe 50 times, always late at night, always alone. I've listened to those 4 seconds of scratching until I can hear it in my sleep. Last month, I prepared another body, different family, different casket, different circumstances. But when I went to position the deceased's hands, I hesitated. My own hands shook as I folded them into place. I've started taking photographs now. Before I seal every casket, I photograph the body from multiple angles. The hands, the face, any jewelry, time-stamped, documented, stored on a separate drive, because I need proof that what I'm seeing is real. I need evidence that the bodies I prepare stay the way I leave them. Most of the time, they do. But 3 weeks ago, I unsealed a casket for a family who wanted to add a letter before burial. The deceased was a young man, 29. I'd positioned his hands across his chest, just like always. When I opened the lid, his right hand had moved. Just slightly. Just enough that his index finger now pointed toward the foot of the casket. I repositioned it, took new photographs, said nothing. I still have Mrs. Vance's file in my desk, still have the footage of that scratching sound, and sometimes, late at night, when the funeral home is empty and quiet, I wonder where that wedding ring went. But mostly, I wonder about her hands pressed flat against the lid, palms up, fingers spread, wondering if she was trying to get out or trying to keep something else from getting in. Every cemetery has one structure that makes even the groundskeepers uncomfortable, and at Hillcrest Memorial, Mausoleum 9 is ours. My name is Lin Chen, and I have worked as head caretaker at Hillcrest Memorial Park in Portland, Oregon for 19 years. I oversee maintenance for our garden mausoleums, 23 marble structures, built between 1920 and 1968, each housing anywhere from 4 to 12 crypts. I know every crack in every foundation, every loose hinge, every temperamental lock. These buildings are old, and old things require patience and attention. Mausoleum 9 sits on the eastern edge of the property, partially shaded by Douglas firs that were already mature when the structure was built in 1934. It's smaller than most only 6 crypts, 3 on each side. The marble facade has weathered to a soft gray, and the bronze door, though tarnished, still bears the original Art Deco detailing. The families who own crypts there rarely visit. I clean the building quarterly, checking for water damage, sweeping out leaves, making sure the door mechanism stays functional. It's quiet work, meditative, usually. Until last November, when the security system flagged an anomaly. Our cemetery installed motion-activated cameras 2 years ago after some vandalism in the older sections. Each mausoleum has a camera mounted on the exterior, angled to catch anyone approaching the entrance. The system sends alerts to my phone if it detects movement between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Mausoleum 9 triggered an alert at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was home, already in bed, but the notification woke me. Probably a deer, I thought, or a raccoon. It happens. I checked the footage on my phone. The timestamp showed 3:17 a.m. exactly. The infrared camera displayed the mausoleum entrance in grayscale. Everything looked normal. Door closed, lock intact. Then the door moved. Not violently, not quickly, just a slow, deliberate swing outward, like someone inside had pushed it open with one hand. The hinges made no sound. I'd oiled them myself 2 weeks earlier. The door opened maybe 30 degrees, then stopped. No one emerged. No one entered. The door simply hung open, showing darkness beyond the threshold. After 30 seconds, it swung closed again. Same slow, deliberate movement. The lock clicked into place. I watched the footage 3 more times. There was no one visible in the frame, no shadows, no figures, just the door opening and closing by itself in the middle of the night. I drove to the cemetery at dawn and inspected Mausoleum 9 personally. The lock was secure. The door showed no signs of forced entry. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it during my last cleaning dust, undisturbed. Spider webs intact in the corners. The 6 sealed crypts silent and still. I filed a maintenance report, suggested the door mechanism might be failing, recommended a full hardware inspection. That night, at 3:17 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Same footage. Door opening slowly, hanging open for 30 seconds, closing again. The next night, 3:17 a.m. Again, I started sleeping with my phone on silent, but I kept checking the footage every morning. For 6 consecutive nights, Mausoleum 9's door opened at exactly 3:17 a.m. and closed again 30 seconds later. No variation in timing, no change in the pattern. On the 7th night, I decided to see it in person. I arrived at the cemetery at 2:45 a.m., parked near the maintenance building, and walked to Mausoleum 9 with a flashlight and my phone. The November air was cold enough to show my breath. Fog drifted between the headstones, making the landscape feel smaller, more confined. I positioned myself behind a large oak tree about 30 feet from the mausoleum entrance. From there, I had a clear view of the door. I checked my watch, 3:05 a.m. The waiting was worse than I'd expected. Every small sound made me flinch. Wind through the trees, gravel settling, my own breathing, 3:16 a.m. 1 minute. I raised my phone to record, keeping the flashlight off. The infrared camera on the mausoleum was already capturing footage, but I wanted my own perspective. 3:17 a.m. The door moved. Same slow outward swing, same deliberate pace. In person, without the infrared filter, I could see details the camera missed. The bronze surface catching faint moonlight, the absolute darkness beyond the threshold, the complete absence of sound. I waited, counting seconds. 15, 20, 25. At 28 seconds, I saw movement in the darkness beyond the door. Not someone walking out, not a figure emerging, just footprints, bare footprints appearing in the dust on the marble threshold. One foot, then the other. Small prints, like a woman's or a teenager's. They appeared from nothing, no visible source, no body casting them, just the impression of feet pressing into the dust, walking from somewhere inside the mausoleum toward the open door. The prints stopped at the threshold, didn't cross into the grass, didn't continue forward, just stopped. Two bare footprints side by side, toes pointed out into the November darkness. At 30 seconds, the door swung closed. I stood behind that oak tree for another 20 minutes before I could move. My hands were shaking too badly to hold the phone steady. When I finally approached the mausoleum, the door was locked. I opened it with my key and shined my flashlight on the threshold. The footprints were there. Two clear impressions in the dust, small, barefoot, toes pointed outward. I measured them. Women's size 6, approximately. I photographed them from multiple angles, then checked the crypts. 6 sealed marble faces, 3 on each wall, names and dates engraved in each. I read them carefully, looking for anyone who might have been young, might have been small, might have left barefoot prints. Bottom left, west wall, Catherine Mary Devereaux, 1917 to 1935, 18 years old. Her crypt was the oldest one in the building. The marble was more weathered than the others, the engraving slightly worn. I swept away the footprints before I left, filed another maintenance report. This time, I requested the door be permanently locked and checked weekly, but every night since then, at 3:17 a.m., my phone still buzzes. I don't watch the footage anymore. I know what it shows. Last week, I brought a measuring tape and checked the distance from Catherine's crypt to the door. Exactly 28 feet. Same number as the seconds the door stays open. I've started avoiding Mausoleum 9 during my rounds. I clean it only when absolutely necessary, always during daylight, always quickly. I don't look at the threshold anymore. I don't want to know if the footprints come back. But yesterday, I received a call from a woman named Elizabeth Devereaux. She's Catherine's great niece. She's planning a family visit next month and wanted to confirm which mausoleum holds her great aunt's remains. I told her Mausoleum 9, gave her the location, mentioned the building was well maintained and secure. She thanked me, then paused. Can I ask you something? The family history says Catherine died young. Pneumonia. But there were always rumors she wanted to leave Portland, that she felt trapped here. Did anyone ever tell you that? No, ma'am. I'm just the caretaker. Of course. Sorry. It's just my grandmother used to say Catherine would have done anything to get out, to go anywhere but here. After we hung up, I pulled up the security footage from last night. 3:17 a.m., the door opening, the 30 seconds of darkness, and this time, for just a moment in the infrared recording, I thought I saw something else. Not footprints, not a figure, just the suggestion of movement, like someone standing, just beyond the threshold, looking out, waiting. I've worked at Hillcrest for 19 years. I've seen grief in every form. I've learned to respect the silence of the dead and the spaces they occupy. But Mausoleum 9 has taught me something else. Some doors open for reasons we're not meant to understand. Some thresholds mark boundaries we can't see, and some people, even in death, are still trying to leave. I'll keep maintaining the building. I'll keep the door locked. I'll keep filing my reports. But I won't be there at 3:17 a.m. ever again. Whatever Catherine Devereaux is doing, whatever she's waiting for, she'll have to do it alone. I've driven the same route to Greenwood Cemetery for 8 years, until the morning my GPS took me somewhere that doesn't exist. My name is Jacob Reeves, and I have worked as a funeral transport driver for Mercy Hill Funeral Services in Olympia, Washington, for 8 years. My job is simple: transport the deceased from our facility to their final resting place with dignity and care. I know every road, every turn, every stop sign between our funeral home and the 3 cemeteries we service. The route to Greenwood is muscle memory: 12.3 miles, 18 minutes in normal traffic. I've never needed GPS for that drive. But on a Tuesday morning in early March, when I started the hearse with Mrs. Dorothy Klein in the back, my phone's navigation app activated automatically. I keep it mounted on the dashboard for longer trips, and sometimes it turns on by itself when the Bluetooth connects. Usually I just ignore it, but that morning, the route it displayed wasn't the one I knew. Instead of directing me onto Highway 101, it showed a turn onto Old Mill Road, a narrow access route I'd never used. I almost ignored it, almost followed my usual path. But something made me hesitate. Maybe curiosity, maybe the strange fog that had settled over Olympia that morning, making everything feel slightly unfamiliar. I took the turn. Old Mill Road ran parallel to the highway for about a mile, then curved east into older residential areas I'd never explored. The houses were small, probably built in the 1940s and 50s. Most looked vacant. The fog made everything soft-edged and uncertain. The GPS directed me through a series of turns: left on Sycamore, right on Patterson, straight through an unmarked intersection. The roads got narrower. The pavement showed cracks and patches. Trees overhung the route, their branches creating a tunnel effect. I checked my mirrors. Mrs. Klein's casket was secure in the back, the white roses her daughter had placed on top undisturbed. Everything was professional. Everything was fine, except I had no idea where I was. The GPS showed I was still headed toward Greenwood, but the route made no sense. I was moving away from the main roads, deeper into residential areas that seemed to thin out into something more rural. Then the road ended. Not at an intersection, not at a turnaround, just ended at a small gravel clearing surrounded by Douglas firs and sword ferns. The GPS indicated I'd arrived at my destination. In the center of the clearing, maybe 20 feet from where I'd stopped, was a grave. Not a cemetery, not a plot in consecrated ground, just a single grave, marked by a simple granite headstone, surrounded by wild grass and morning fog. Fresh flowers sat at its base, white roses, the same variety resting on Mrs. Klein's casket. I put the hearse in park and sat there, engine idling, trying to understand what I was looking at. The grave was well maintained, grass trimmed, headstone clean. The flowers looked recent, probably placed within the last day or two. Someone cared for this site. Someone visited regularly. I should have turned around, should have backed out of that clearing and found my way to the real Greenwood Cemetery. But I got out of the hearse. The fog muffled every sound. My footsteps on the gravel seemed too loud. I approached the headstone slowly, respectfully, the way you approach any grave. The inscription was simple: Unnamed, March 3, 2015, beloved. No birth date, no last name, just unnamed, and a single death date from 9 years ago, and one word: beloved. March 3rd, today's date, 9 years ago. I looked around the clearing. No other graves, no signs of a family plot, no indication that this was part of any official cemetery. Just this one marker, this one grave, maintained with obvious care in the middle of nowhere. I pulled out my phone to check where I was. No signal. The GPS still showed I was at Greenwood Cemetery, but the map display had gone blank. Just a blue dot in empty space. When I looked up, I noticed something I'd missed before. There was a second set of tire tracks in the gravel. Fresh ones. They led into the clearing, circled the grave, and led back out the way I'd come. Hearse tracks, wider wheelbase, same tread pattern as the vehicle I was driving. I walked back to my hearse and checked the odometer. 12.3 miles from Mercy Hill, exactly the same distance as the regular route to Greenwood. My hands were shaking when I got back in the driver's seat. I put the vehicle in reverse and carefully backed out of the clearing. The GPS recalculated immediately, showing a new route. This time, familiar roads, Highway 101, the entrance to Greenwood Cemetery. The rest of the drive was normal. 18 minutes, no fog, no strange turns. I arrived at Greenwood, delivered Mrs. Klein to the graveside service, completed my paperwork, professional, routine, but I couldn't stop thinking about that grave. That afternoon, back at the funeral home, I checked our records, searched for any burial on March 3rd, 2015, found nothing, checked with the other funeral homes in the area. No one had record of an unnamed burial that day. I tried to find Old Mill Road on a map. It existed, but it didn't connect to any of the side streets the GPS had directed me through. Those roads either didn't exist or had been closed for years. I asked dispatch if any other drivers had reported unusual GPS routes. They looked at me like I was crazy. Jacob, you've been driving to Greenwood for 8 years. You don't need GPS. I know. But it activated on its own this morning, then ignore it next time. I tried. For the next 3 weeks, I drove to Greenwood the normal way. No GPS, no deviations, everything routine. But yesterday morning, when I loaded Mr. Thomas Chen's casket into the hearse, the GPS activated again. Same route. Old Mill Road, the series of turns, the narrow streets, the gravel clearing. I didn't follow it. I forced myself to stay on Highway 101, hands tight on the wheel, ignoring the persistent voice telling me to turn left, turn right, proceed to the highlighted route. But when I arrived at Greenwood and opened the back of the hearse, I found something that shouldn't have been there. Resting on top of Mr. Chen's casket, tucked beside the spray of lilies his family had ordered, was a single white rose. Fresh, dewy, like it had just been cut. I removed it quickly before the family arrived, threw it in a trash bin behind the chapel. Didn't mention it in my paperwork. But last night, I drove back to Old Mill Road, alone. No body in the hearse, no GPS directing me, just my own memory of the turns, the streets, The path through the fog, the clearing, was empty. No gravel, no tire tracks, no grave, just dense forest and sword ferns, like the space had never existed. I searched for 2 hours, drove every side street, checked every dead end, found nothing. This morning, I checked the GPS history on my phone. It shows no record of the route from 3 weeks ago, no saved locations, no breadcrumb trail. But when I looked at my hearse's GPS system, the one built into the dashboard, there was one saved destination. Unnamed, March 3rd, coordinates that don't correspond to any mapped location. I haven't deleted it. I'm not sure I can, because part of me knows I'll take that route again. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next week, but eventually the GPS will activate and I'll follow it and I'll end up in that clearing with fresh white roses and a grave that has no name. I've been driving the same route to Greenwood Cemetery for 8 years. I know every turn, but now I know there's another route, one that only appears when it wants to be found, one that leads to someone unnamed and beloved, buried in a place that exists between the roads we know and the spaces we can't map. And whoever they were, whoever placed those roses, whoever maintains that grave, they're still waiting, still calling, still expecting someone to arrive. I just hope the next time my GPS activates, it's not my name on that headstone. There are warnings in old ledgers that most people dismiss as superstition, but I've learned that sometimes the dead leave instructions we should follow. My name is Miriam Castellanos, and I have worked as the head archivist at Oakmont Cemetery in Savannah, Georgia for 26 years. My job involves maintaining burial records, digitizing old ledgers, and preserving the historical documentation that spans back to 1867. I spend my days in a climate-controlled basement office surrounded by leather-bound volumes and yellowed paper, translating handwritten entries into searchable databases. Most entries are straightforward: name, date of death, plot location, payment records. But occasionally, I find notations that make me pause. Last April, I was digitizing the 1900 to 1910 ledger when I came across an entry that stood out. The handwriting was different from the standard clerk's script, more urgent, with heavier pressure on certain words. Crypt 1904. Deceased, Jonathan Aldrich Marsh. Date of interment, the 12th of October, 1904. Payment, paid in full by estate. Special instruction: do not open under any circumstances. That last line was underlined 3 times. Below it, in smaller script, someone had added a note dated June 1962. Crypt opened for family burial. Present, Reverend Thomas Brightwell, Harrison Marsh, grandson, Elizabeth Marsh, David Kelly, funeral director, Agnes Kelly, Martin Cross Cemetery, superintendent. Crypt resealed the 17th of June, 1962. Then, in different ink, 3 more entries. Reverend Brightwell deceased the 4th of November, 1962. Heart failure. Harrison Marsh deceased the 21st of February 1963, stroke. David Kelly deceased the 8th of April 1963, pneumonia. I sat back in my chair and read it again. 3 people who attended the 1962 opening, all dead within 6 months. All listed with causes of death, but something about the notation felt incomplete. Heart failure, stroke, pneumonia. Common enough causes, especially for that era. But the archivist who'd recorded these deaths had drawn a thin line connecting all three names back to the original entry. Do not open under any circumstances. I pulled the 1962 ledger and found the burial record for Harrison Marsh's wife, Catherine, who'd been interred in Crypt 1904 on June 17th, 1962. The entry was standard, except for one detail. The funeral director's notes section contained a single word, incident, no explanation, no description. I spent the next week tracking down everything I could find about Crypt 1904. The structure itself was located in the oldest section of Oakmont, a granite mausoleum built to house 6 members of the Marsh family. According to property records, only 2 burials had ever taken place there: Jonathan Aldrich Marsh in 1904 and Catherine Marsh in 1962. 4 empty crypts, 60 years between burials, and a warning that 3 people had apparently ignored. I contacted the current cemetery superintendent, Thomas Vieira, and asked if he knew anything about Crypt 1904. That old thing? Nobody's been in there for decades. Family line died out in the 80s. Why? I explained what I'd found in the ledgers. The warning, the deaths, the incident notation. Thomas was quiet for a moment. You want to open it? I want to understand what the warning was about. Miriam, you've been doing this job long enough to know that some things are recorded the way they are for a reason, which is exactly why I need to know what that reason was. He agreed to meet me at the crypt the following Saturday. We'd do a structural inspection check for deterioration, water damage, anything that might explain why the original entry had warned against opening it. The mausoleum sat beneath a canopy of live oaks, the granite darkened by a century of Georgia weather. The bronze door was oxidized to a deep green, the Marsh family name barely visible on the weathered plaque. Thomas brought bolt cutters for the chain that had sealed the entrance since the 1980s. The lock broke easily. The door, however, required both of us to pull it open. The hinges screamed with rust and resistance. The interior was smaller than I'd expected. 2 crypts on each side, one above the other. 4 sealed marble faces, each engraved with Marsh, and a year, 1890, 1891, 1892, 1893, reserved for family members who'd never been interred. At the far end, 2 occupied crypts. Bottom, Jonathan Aldrich Marsh, 1847 to 1904. Top, Catherine Marsh, 1919 to 1962. The air inside smelled wrong, not decay, something chemical and sharp, like old formaldehyde mixed with mineral deposits. Thomas swept his flashlight across the space. Everything looks structurally sound. No water damage, no signs of soam. He stopped. His light had caught something on Jonathan's crypt. Scratches, deep gouges in the marble, running horizontally across the sealed face. Dozens of them, concentrated near the right edge where the seal met the wall. They looked fresh white stone, showing through the darkened surface. That's new, Thomas said quietly. I inspected this building 2 years ago. Those marks weren't there. I moved closer. The scratches were systematic, not random. They formed patterns, repeated attempts at the same spot, like something had been trying to break through from inside. Miriam, look at Catherine's crypt. I turned. Catherine's crypt, positioned directly above Jonathan's, showed similar markings, but these ran vertically, downward, toward where Jonathan's crypt sat below. Thomas checked his phone. No service in here. We should go. Wait, I want to check the records one more time. I pulled out my notebook where I'd copied the relevant entries. Reverend Brightwell, Harrison Marsh, David Kelly, all dead within 6 months of the 1962 opening. Thomas, who else attended that opening? The ledger listed 6 people. He scanned the names I'd written. Elizabeth Marsh, Agnes Kelly, Martin Cross. You said 3 people died. What about the other 3? I hadn't thought to check. I don't know. We left the mausoleum, and I spent that evening searching death records. Elizabeth Marsh lived until 1998. Agnes Kelly died in 2003. Martin Cross was still alive, 94 years old, living in a nursing home in Brunswick. 3 people dead within 6 months. The pattern was clear. Every male who'd attended the opening had died. Every female had survived. I called the nursing home and asked if I could visit Martin Cross for a historical interview. They said he rarely received visitors, but agreed to ask him. He called me back himself that evening. His voice was thin but steady. You're asking about the Marsh Crypt? Yes, sir. I'm trying to understand what happened when we opened it in '62, if you're willing to talk about it. Long silence. Then, I was 24 years old, new hire. Cemetery superintendent told me to help with a family interment. Said it was routine. It wasn't. What did you see? When we opened Jonathan Marsh's crypt to make room for Catherine, there was something wrong with the casket. The seal was broken from the inside, the lid was cracked, and there were marks on the interior walls, scratches, like something had been trying to get out. Something? Jonathan Marsh was buried in 1904. By 1962, there shouldn't have been anything left but bones and fabric. But when Reverend Brightwell looked inside, he said Martin's voice cracked. He said the body was wrong, positioned wrong, facing the wrong direction. What direction? Toward Catherine's crypt. Like he'd known she'd be placed there. Like he'd been waiting. I felt cold despite the warm Georgia evening. After we sealed everything back up, Reverend Brightwell told us never to speak about what we'd seen. Said some families have histories that shouldn't be disturbed. Then he, Harrison, and David all died within 6 months. But you survived. I wasn't clergy. Wasn't family. Wasn't the one who actually moved the casket. I just watched. After we hung up, I sat with my notes for a long time. Then I added a new entry to the digital record for Crypt 1904. Archive inspection conducted June 2024. Structural anomalies noted. Do not open under any circumstances. Previous warning confirmed and reinforced. I printed the entry, signed it, and filed it in 3 separate locations. Last week, I received a call from a genealogy researcher asking about the Marsh family records. She wanted to know if any crypts were available for purchase. I told her the Marsh mausoleum was sealed permanently due to structural concerns. She thanked me and hung up. I walked to the archive that afternoon and pulled the 1904 ledger one more time, running my finger over that underlined warning. Do not open under any circumstances. Whoever wrote it knew something. Maybe they'd seen the same scratches. Maybe they'd opened Jonathan's casket before it was sealed. Maybe they'd understood what kind of man he was and what he might become in death. I don't know what happened to Jonathan Marsh in that crypt between 1904 and 1962. I don't know why 3 men died after disturbing his rest. But I know the warning was real, and I know those scratches on the marble, the ones reaching toward Catherine's crypt, weren't there 2 years ago. Some warnings exist for reasons we're not meant to understand. Some crypts should stay sealed, and some archivists know when to stop asking questions. I've locked up our funeral home hundreds of times, but only once have I checked the security feed before leaving and wished I hadn't. My name is Director Andrew Hayes, and I have worked as Managing Funeral Director at Riverside Memorial Chapel in Burlington, Vermont for 12 years. My responsibilities include overseeing services, managing staff, maintaining our facilities, and ensuring everything runs with the dignity and professionalism our families deserve. Part of that routine involves being the last person to leave each night, checking every room, confirming all doors are locked, and arming the security system before I drive home. It's methodical work, peaceful, usually. The kind of quiet that comes from knowing everyone is exactly where they should be, until a Wednesday night in January when that quiet felt different. We'd held a viewing that evening for Mr. Leonard Hartwell, an 83-year-old retired teacher who'd passed away peacefully in his sleep. Simple service, small gathering. His daughter, Susan, had been the last family member to leave around 7:30, and my staff had finished cleanup by 8. I stayed late to finish paperwork intake forms for a service scheduled for Friday, invoices that needed processing, the usual administrative tasks that pile up during busy weeks. By 9:15, I was ready to leave. I did my standard walkthrough. Chapel empty, chairs straightened, hymnals returned to their shelves, reception area clean, coffee urns washed, guest book closed, preparation room secured, equipment cleaned, doors locked. The viewing room was my last stop. Mr. Hartwell lay in repose in a mahogany casket, positioned on the hydraulic cart we'd use to transport him to the chapel in the morning. He was dressed in a blue suit his daughter had selected, hands folded across his chest, expression peaceful. I'd prepared him myself 2 days earlier. Everything was exactly as it should be. I dimmed the lights to their overnight setting, checked that the flowers were stable, and pulled the viewing room door closed. Not locked, we never lock the room when a deceased is present. It's policy. If anything happens overnight, we need immediate access. The security office is a small room near the main entrance where our camera feeds display on 2 monitors. We have 6 cameras total: parking lot, front entrance, hallway, chapel, preparation room, and viewing room. Standard practice is to scan all feeds before arming the system and leaving. I sat down at the desk and checked each monitor. Parking lot empty except for my car. Front entrance secure, hallway clear. Chapel dark and still. Preparation room locked and empty. Viewing room, I paused. Mr. Hartwell's casket sat in the center of the frame, flowers arranged on either side, exactly as I'd left it 2 minutes earlier. The overnight lighting cast soft shadows across the room. Everything looked normal. I almost moved on to arm the system when I noticed the timestamp. Our cameras record continuously and display a running timestamp in the lower right corner. The viewing room feed showed 9:18 p.m. My watch showed 9:19 p.m. A 1-minute delay. Not unusual, sometimes the feed lags slightly depending on the recording buffer. But as I watched, Mr. Hartwell's head moved, not dramatically, not like something from a movie, just a slow, subtle turn, maybe 2 degrees, maybe less. His face, which had been centered perfectly in the casket, now appeared slightly angled toward the camera. I sat frozen, staring at the monitor. The timestamp advanced. 9:19 p.m., still 1 minute behind real time. Mr. Hartwell's expression changed. The peaceful, neutral look I'd spent an hour creating shifted. The corners of his mouth lifted. Not much, just enough to suggest a smile. My heart was hammering. I looked at the other monitors, all showing normal, real-time feeds. Just the viewing room was delayed. On screen, Mr. Hartwell's smile widened. Slow, deliberate, like someone savoring a private joke. Then he turned his head fully toward the camera, and the smile became unmistakable. I stood up so fast my chair hit the wall behind me, grabbed my keys, ran down the hallway to the viewing room, and yanked the door open. Mr. Hartwell lay exactly as I'd positioned him, head centered, face peaceful, hands folded, the same neutral expression I'd created 2 days ago during preparation. No smile, no turned head, nothing out of place. I stood there for maybe 3 minutes, breathing hard, checking every detail. His skin tone unchanged, his position exact, his clothing undisturbed. I touched his forehead gently. Cold, rigid, dead for 3 days, exactly as he should be. When I returned to the security office, the viewing room monitor showed the same thing I'd just seen in person. Mr. Hartwell at rest, peaceful, centered in the frame. I rewound the footage. At 9:18 p.m., the recording showed exactly what I'd witnessed. The head turning, the smile forming, the full rotation toward the camera. 37 seconds of footage showing a dead man moving, smiling, looking directly into the lens. At 9:19 p.m., when I'd opened the viewing room door, the feed showed me entering the frame, approaching the casket, standing there motionless. The recording was continuous. No gaps, no glitches, just those 37 seconds of movement that shouldn't exist. I saved the footage to a USB drive and deleted it from the main system. I'm not sure why. Maybe I wanted to be the only one who knew. Maybe I was protecting our reputation. Maybe I just needed to control some part of what I'd seen. I went back to the viewing room one more time. Mr. Hartwell remained still. I apologized quietly for what, I'm not sure, for watching him, for doubting my own work, for being unable to explain what the camera had recorded. The funeral proceeded normally the next morning. Susan and her family held a beautiful service. Mr. Hartwell was transported to Lakeview Cemetery and laid to rest without incident. I never mentioned the footage to anyone, but I changed my routine. Now, when I do the final walkthrough each night, I avoid the security monitors. I check each room in person, visually confirm everything is secure, and arm the system without reviewing the feeds. Because 3 weeks after Mr. Hartwell's service, we held a viewing for Mrs. Patricia Donovan, 71 years old. Cancer, peaceful passing. I prepared her myself, positioned her carefully in her casket, hands folded, expression serene. That night, I broke my new rule and checked the security feed. At 9:22 p.m., 1 minute behind real time, Mrs. Donovan's eyes opened. I watched for 15 seconds. Her eyes moved slowly, scanning the ceiling, then tracking across the room to find the camera. When her gaze locked onto the lens, I shut off the monitor and walked directly to the viewing room. She was exactly as I'd left her. Eyes closed, peaceful, still. The footage showed the same thing I'd seen with Mr. Hartwell. 39 seconds of impossible movement, followed by absolute stillness when I entered the room. I deleted that recording too. Last month, I asked our security company about the cameras, asked if there could be a delay in the feed, some kind of buffering issue that might create visual artifacts. The technician checked our system thoroughly. Everything's functioning perfectly, Mr. Hayes. Real-time feed. No lag. No glitches. These cameras are reliable. Whatever they record is actually happening, and if something appears on the recording but isn't visible in person, he looked at me strangely. That's not how cameras work. They can't show you things that aren't there, but they can show you things that are there, even if only for 37 seconds, even if only in the minute between when something happens and when you see it. I have a USB drive in my desk drawer now. 11 recordings, 11 people I've prepared over the past 8 months, all of them moving in that 1 minute delay, all of them still and peaceful when I check in person. Some turn their heads, some smile, some open their eyes. One, an elderly man named Thomas Chen, sat up partially before lying back down. All of them return to stillness the moment I enter the room, as if they were never disturbed at all. I don't know what happens in that gap between recorded time and real time. I don't know if it's the cameras showing me something true, or if there's something about our viewing room that allows the dead one final moment of movement before they settle into permanent rest. What I do know is this: I still prepare bodies with the same care and dignity I always have. I still ensure every family receives compassionate service. I still lock up each night and arm the security system. But I don't watch the monitors anymore, because the dead deserve their privacy, even in that strange minute between what is and what we see. And because some smiles, the ones that appear on faces I've personally confirmed are cold and still aren't meant for the living to understand. Mr. Hartwell's recording is still on that USB drive. Sometimes late at night when I'm alone in my office, I think about watching it again, but I never do. Some things, once seen, can't be unseen, and some footage is better left in the dark, along with whatever truth it holds about that space between death and burial, between stillness and rest. The viewing room door is open tonight. Someone new lies in repose, and I will not check the cameras before I leave. In 23 years of embalming, I've learned that families rarely forget where they've laid their dead to rest, which made the Moretti request impossible from the start. My name is Jude Patterson, and I have worked as chief embalmer at Hillside Memorial Gardens in Santa Rosa, California, for 23 years. My responsibilities extend beyond preparation. I also assist with crypt placements in our garden mausoleums, coordinate with families on burial logistics, and maintain our records of occupied spaces. It's detailed work that requires precision and absolute certainty about where each person rests. The Moretti family contacted us on a Thursday in late September. David Moretti had passed away at 79, and his children wanted him placed in the family's garden crypt. He always said he wanted to rest near the oak tree. His daughter Rachel told me during our arrangement conference, that's why grandfather purchased the crypt in garden level 3. The view of that old oak was what he loved most about Hillside. I pulled up our crypt records for garden level 3. The garden mausoleums at Hillside are beautiful structures, marble facades, bronze gates, each one positioned to offer views of specific landscape features. Level 3 overlooked a massive valley oak that had stood on the property for over 200 years. According to our records, the Moretti family crypt number 47 had been purchased in 1989. One occupant currently interred, Rachel's grandfather, Anthony Moretti, who'd passed in 1992. We'll have the crypt opened and prepared for your father's placement, I told Rachel. The ceremony can take place Tuesday morning if that works for your family. Perfect. Thank you, Jude. On Monday, I went to Garden Level 3 with our ground supervisor, Kenneth, to prepare for the opening. The Garden Mausoleum is one of our oldest structures, built in the late 1980s when the concept of outdoor crypts was gaining popularity. 48 crypts total, arranged in 6 rows of 8, each sealed with bronze nameplates. Kenneth checked his key ring. Number 47 should be row 6, middle section. We walked along the marble pathway to row 6. The nameplates gleamed in the afternoon sun, family names engraved in elegant script, dates marking the boundaries of lives completed. Crypt 47 sat 4 spaces from the oak tree, exactly as the Moretti family had described, but the nameplate didn't say Moretti. It said Anthony Moretti, 1913 to 1992. Below that, a second name, David Moretti, 1945 to 2024. Both names, both dates, both already engraved on a bronze plate that showed years of weathering and oxidation. Kenneth and I stared at it in silence. That's impossible, I finally said. David just died last week. I prepared his body myself 3 days ago. Maybe someone pre-engraved it? Families do that sometimes. Not with the death date. No one knew David would die this year. I pulled out my phone and checked our digital records again. Crypt 47, Moretti family, purchased 1989. One occupant, Anthony Moretti, interred 1992. No mention of David, no pre-planning, no second name. Kenneth knelt down and examined the nameplate more closely. Jude, this engraving isn't new. Look at the oxidation pattern. This plate has been here for decades. He was right. The bronze showed the same level of weathering across both names. If David's name had been added recently, the metal would show different aging patterns. But it didn't. Both engravings looked identical in age. We need to open this, I said. Kenneth retrieved the tools from our maintenance vehicle. The crypt's sealing mechanism was standard for its era, 4 bronze bolts securing a marble faceplate. We removed them carefully, respectfully, and slid the heavy plate aside. The interior was dark, cool, and smelled of old concrete and sealed air. Kenneth shined his flashlight inside. 2 caskets, side by side, both sealed, both showing years of undisturbed rest. My mouth went dry. Kenneth, shine the light on the nameplates. Each casket had a small bronze nameplate affixed to the foot panel. Left casket, Anthony Moretti, 1913 to 1992. Right casket, David Moretti, 1945 to 2024. Both plates showed the same oxidation, the same age, the same decades of existence. This can't be real, Kenneth whispered. I checked the records on my phone one more time, hands shaking. The digital file was clear. Only Anthony had been interred in this crypt. Only 1 casket should be here. But we were looking at 2. I need to call the family, I said. Rachel answered on the second ring. I explained as calmly as I could that we'd found an unusual situation with the crypt and needed to verify some information. Rachel, when was the last time your family visited your grandfather's crypt? Oh, we go every year on his birthday. June 14th. We were just there 3 months ago, and when you visited, did you notice anything unusual about the nameplate? No. Why? It's always been the same. Just grandfather's name. Not your father's name? Of course not. Dad was still alive in June. After I hung up, Kenneth and I stood in front of that open crypt for a long time. Two caskets that shouldn't both exist. Two nameplates that couldn't both be decades old. And a family that had visited 3 months ago and seen only one name. We need to verify what's in these caskets, I said quietly. Kenneth looked at me. Are you sure? I prepared David Moretti's body myself 4 days ago. He's in our preparation room right now, in our facility, waiting for Tuesday's service. Whatever is in that right-hand casket, it's not him. We returned to Hillside's main building, and I went directly to the preparation room. David Moretti's body lay on the table where I'd left it, partially through the embalming process. I'd been planning to finish the procedure that evening. I touched his shoulder. Cold. Deceased for 6 days now. Exactly as expected. But I pulled out my phone and took photographs. Documentation. Proof that David Moretti was here, in our facility, not in a crypt that showed his name with decades of weathering. That evening, I contacted a metallurgist I knew from a previous forensics case, sent him photographs of the nameplate, asked him to analyze the oxidation patterns and aging. His response came 2 hours later. Both engravings show identical weathering consistent with 30-plus years of outdoor exposure. If one was added recently, I'd expect to see clear differences in the bronze patina. This plate appears to have been created and installed in the early 1990 seconds, with both names present. But that was impossible. Tuesday morning arrived. The Moretti family gathered for David's interment. I'd finished the preparation, dressed him in the suit Rachel had selected, and positioned him in the mahogany casket they'd chosen. We transported him to Garden Level 3. When we arrived at Crypt 47, the nameplate showed only one name, Anthony Moretti, 1913 to 1992. David's name was gone. Kenneth looked at me. I looked at the nameplate. The family gathered around, none of them aware that 48 hours earlier, two names had been engraved there. We opened the crypt. One casket, Anthony Moretti, left side. The right side was completely empty. No casket, no nameplate, no evidence that anything had ever occupied that space. The service proceeded normally. David was placed beside his father. The crypt was sealed. The family thanked us for our compassionate care. After they left, Kenneth and I examined the nameplate again. It never had two names, Kenneth said quietly. We both saw something that wasn't there, but I had photographs on my phone. I pulled them up. The images from Monday clearly showed both names, both dates, both engravings with identical weathering. I showed Kenneth. He stared at the screen, then at the nameplate, then back at the screen. I don't understand, he whispered. Neither did I. That night, I reviewed our security footage from Garden Level 3. The cameras run continuously, recording the mausoleum grounds. Monday afternoon, 2:47 p.m., Kenneth and I approach Crypt 47. On camera, the nameplate clearly shows two names. We open the crypt, two caskets visible in the frame. Monday evening, 11:33 p.m., the camera shows the open crypt, marble plate leaning against the wall, two caskets still inside. Tuesday morning, 6:15 a.m., the camera shows the crypt, still open, One casket inside. The right space is empty. No one entered. No one removed anything. Between 11:33 p.m. and 6:15 a.m., while the camera recorded continuously, one casket simply ceased to exist. I saved that footage, backed it up in 3 locations, because I know what I saw. Kenneth knows what he saw. The metallurgist confirmed what the photographs showed. For 36 hours, David Moretti rested in a crypt while his body was still in my preparation room. For 36 hours, 2 versions of reality existed simultaneously. One where he was already buried, one where he was waiting to be. And then, when it was time for the real burial, the impossible version vanished. I still work at Hillside, still prepare bodies with the same care, still assist with crypt placements. But I don't trust the records anymore. And when families tell me their loved ones always wanted to rest in a specific place, I wonder if somewhere, somehow, those loved ones are already there, waiting in crypts that shouldn't exist yet, wearing nameplates that haven't been engraved, resting in futures that haven't arrived. David Moretti is buried in Garden Level 3 now. One casket, one name, exactly as it should be. But I have photographs of 2, and I can't explain which version was real. Some coffins carry warnings that outlive everyone who knew why they were written, and I found one that should have stayed buried. My name is Carla Mendez, and I have worked as a cemetery transfer technician for Heritage Relocation Services in New Orleans, Louisiana, for 11 years. My job is specialized when cemeteries close, when families move, when land is repurposed. I'm the one who handles the physical transfer of remains from old burial sites to new ones. It requires respect, precision, and a strong stomach. You learn quickly that the dead have their own kind of weight, their own presence, and you treat every transfer with the dignity it deserves. Most of my work involves 20th century burials, modern caskets, standard procedures, clear documentation, but in October I was contracted for something unusual, a full cemetery relocation in Street Bernard Parish, the old street. Augustine Cemetery was being moved to make way for flood infrastructure, and my company won the bid to transfer 237 graves to a new location 15 miles north. The work was systematic, each grave excavated carefully, each casket documented, photographed, and transported in specialized vehicles designed for this exact purpose. Most transfers went smoothly until we reached Plot 89. The burial records showed a single occupant, unnamed male, interred 1889. No family name, no biographical information, just a plot number and a date. The only unusual notation was handwritten in old ink at the bottom of the ledger page, sealed by court order. My supervisor, Raymond, pointed it out. That's strange. Court-ordered sealing usually means something legal, disputed estate, criminal case, health emergency. But from 1889, whatever the reason was, everyone involved is long dead. We excavated the plot on a Wednesday morning. 6 feet down, we found the casket. It was remarkably preserved sealed iron construction, the kind used in the late 1800s for high-profile burials or when families wanted extra protection against the elements. The metal showed rust and corrosion, but the structural integrity was intact. The lid bore an engraved plate, sealed 1889, Court Order 47B. No name, no dates, just that reference to a court order that no longer existed in any accessible records. We transport it as is, Raymond said. Don't open it. Whatever legal reasons sealed this thing, we're not getting involved. We used the crane to lift the casket from the ground. It was heavier than expected iron construction plus whatever remained inside. We secured it in my transport vehicle alongside 3 other caskets from that section of the cemetery. The drive to the new cemetery normally took 25 minutes. Flat highway, minimal traffic, straightforward route. I was 15 minutes in when I heard it, tapping, soft, rhythmic, coming from the cargo area. I glanced in the rear view mirror. The 4 caskets sat on their specialized cradles, secured with straps, exactly as I'd loaded them. Nothing moved, nothing visible. Tap, tap, tap. I pulled over, got out, opened the rear doors. All 4 caskets remained secure. No shifting, no damage, but the sound continued, a steady tapping, like fingernails on metal. It was coming from the iron casket. I stood there on the shoulder of Highway 46, delivery trucks passing me at 70 miles per hour, listening to something tap from inside a coffin sealed for 135 years. Tap, tap, tap. You're hearing the metal contract, I told myself. Temperature change, expansion and contraction. Perfectly normal, but the tapping had rhythm, deliberate spacing. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, pause. I got back in the vehicle and drove the remaining 10 minutes with the radio turned up loud enough to drown out whatever sounds were coming from the cargo area. At the new cemetery, I reported the tapping to Raymond. I don't hear anything, he said. It was happening during transport. Consistent tapping. 3 beats. Repeating. Metal fatigue. Happens with these old iron caskets sometimes. He knocked on the lid. Solid, dull thunks. No response. We'll bury it this afternoon. Everything's fine. But I wasn't fine. Something about that casket felt wrong. The weight, the sound, the complete absence of identifying information. Before the reburial, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I accessed the historical archives at the Street Bernard Parish Courthouse and searched for Court Order 47B from 1889. It took 3 hours, but I found it. The document was fragile, barely legible, but the essential information was there. Court Order 47B, issued the 14th of September 1889. The remains of name redacted are to be sealed in iron casket and interred immediately. No exhumation permitted. No identification to be recorded. Cause: public safety concern related to illegible outbreak. Signed, Judge Marion Thibault. Public safety concern. Outbreak. 1889 was yellow fever territory in New Orleans. Outbreaks killed thousands. Bodies were sometimes sealed and buried quickly to prevent spread. But this order specifically prohibited identification, and it mentioned only one person, despite outbreak, suggesting multiple victims. I photocopied the document and returned to the cemetery. The iron casket sat beside its new grave, ready for reburial. Raymond was supervising the crane setup. Raymond, I found the court order. It mentions a public safety concern, possible disease outbreak. We might want to notify. Carla, it's been 135 years. Whatever disease was in that casket is long dead. We're burying it now. I think we should open it first. Verify what's inside. Make sure. We are not opening a court-sealed casket from the 19th century. That's not our job. We transfer remains. That's it. The reburial proceeded. The iron casket was lowered into the new plot. Fresh earth covered it. A temporary marker was placed indicating unknown 1889, transferred from Street Augustine Cemetery. I should have let it go. Finished my contract. Moved on to the next job. But that night, I couldn't stop thinking about the tapping, the rhythm, the deliberate pattern: 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, pause. I researched historical communication codes. Morse code didn't match. No obvious pattern emerged. Then I found it an old prison signal system from the 1800s used by inmates in Louisiana State Penitentiary. 3 taps meant help. 3 taps, pause. 3 taps meant help me. I sat with that information for a long time. Someone in that casket had been signaling for help in 1889. Someone had been sealed alive, or sealed dying, or sealed while still aware enough to try to communicate. And the court had ordered it, specifically, by name redacted, for public safety. The next morning, I drove back to the new cemetery, found the fresh grave. The temporary marker stood crooked in the disturbed earth. I brought flowers, white lilies. I'm not sure why. As I placed them by the marker, I heard something, faint, underground, tap, tap, tap. I stepped back, waited, listened, tap, tap, tap. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats. Help me, I called Raymond. The casket is still making sounds. I'm standing at the grave right now. I can hear it. Carla, you're stressed. This job gets to people sometimes. Take a few days off. I'm not stressed. I'm hearing tapping, the same pattern from the transport. Metal settling, earth compression, acoustic anomalies. Take a break. He hung up. I stood there for another hour. The tapping continued. Regular, persistent. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats. That was 3 weeks ago. I completed my contract with Street Bernard Parish, transferred the remaining graves without incident, submitted my final reports, but I drive past that new cemetery sometimes. Park near the section where Plot 89 was relocated. Walk to the temporary marker that still hasn't been replaced with something permanent. And I listen. The tapping has stopped. Or maybe I've just learned not to hear it. Or maybe whatever was trying to communicate from inside that iron casket finally gave up after 135 years. I don't know what was sealed in that coffin in 1889. I don't know who they were, or what public safety concern justified burying someone with their name erased from history. But I know they were asking for help. And I know that even after 135 years in the ground, even after being moved to a new cemetery, even after every person who knew their story had died, they were still asking. I found the court order in my truck last week, the photocopy I'd made. I'd forgotten I'd kept it. At the bottom, below Judge Thibault's signature, someone had written one more line in pencil. Faded, almost illegible, but still there. May God forgive what we've done. The iron casket rests in its new grave now. The earth has settled. The grass has started growing back. And somewhere 6 feet down, in darkness that hasn't seen light since 1889, something that was sealed by court order continues its long silence. I just hope it's finally at peace, but I doubt it. Because sometimes the dead don't rest. Sometimes they just wait. And sometimes they tap 3 times, asking for help that will never come. I've worked enough funerals to recognize the regulars, the grievers, who attend every service, the curious neighbors, the distant relatives, but only one person has attended every funeral I've ever worked. And I didn't realize it until I saw her photograph. My name is Marcus Townsend, and I have worked as a funeral attendant at Westlawn Memorial Services in Richmond, Virginia for 16 years. My role is to assist families during services, greet guests, manage the guest book, coordinate with clergy, ensure everything runs smoothly. I stand at the back of the chapel during services, available but unobtrusive, there to help if needed, but otherwise invisible. You learn to read a room when you work funerals. You notice who cries, who stays stoic, who arrives late, who leaves early. You develop a sense for the dynamics, the estranged siblings standing on opposite sides of the room, the business associates who came out of obligation, the true mourners who can barely stand. And you notice the repeats, the people who show up at multiple services. Some people attend funerals professionally, clergy, funeral directors from other establishments, hospice workers who grow attached to their patients' families. Some are simply members of tight-knit communities where everyone knows everyone else. But there's one woman I've seen at every single funeral I've worked for the past 16 years, and I never questioned it until last Tuesday. She wears a gray coat, always the same style, mid-length, simple cut, no distinguishing features. She sits in the back, never in the front rows, never speaks to the family, never signs the guest book. She attends the service, remains for the entire duration, and leaves quietly before the family processes out. I noticed her early in my career, but assumed she was a regular community member. Richmond's not a huge city. Families overlap. It made sense that someone who knew a lot of people might attend multiple funerals. But over 16 years, she attended every single funeral, hundreds of them, different families, different denominations, different socioeconomic backgrounds, services for elderly people who'd lived full lives and services for children taken too soon. Catholic, Baptist, Methodist, non-denominational, secular, every single one. And she never aged, never changed. Same gray coat, same quiet presence in the back row. I didn't think about it consciously. She became part of the background until last Tuesday, when the Henderson family held a service for their mother, Margaret Henderson, who'd passed away at 87. I was setting up the guest book when Margaret's daughter, Patricia, arrived early with a box of photographs. She wanted to create a memory board, a collection of images from her mother's life displayed near the entrance. "Would you mind helping me arrange these?" she asked. "I'm not sure I can do it without crying." I helped her sort through maybe 60 photographs. Margaret as a young woman, Margaret at her wedding, Margaret with her children, Margaret in her garden, a full life captured in fading color prints. Near the bottom of the box, Patricia pulled out an older photograph, black and white, the edges yellowed with age. "This is from 1962, she said. "My mother's sister's funeral." Margaret was only 33. She kept this photo her whole life. The photograph showed a group of mourners outside a church. Margaret was identifiable in the front, young, grief-stricken, holding a handkerchief, and in the background, standing apart from the main group, was a woman in a gray coat, the same gray coat, the same face, the woman I'd seen at every funeral for 16 years. My hands went cold. "Patricia," I said carefully, "who is the woman in the gray coat?" She looked at the photograph more closely. "I don't know. Just someone at the funeral, I suppose. Why? Do you know her name? No, my mother never mentioned her. Is it important? No, I lied. Just curious. The service proceeded normally. I stood at my usual position in the back of the chapel, and exactly as expected, the woman in the gray coat sat 3 rows from the rear, left side, watching the service with the same quiet attention she always showed. After the family processed out, after the guests left, after I'd cleaned up and prepared the chapel for the next day, I went to our archives. We keep photographs of services when families provide them, usually for memory boards or memorial videos. I pulled files from the last 5 years and started going through photographs. The woman in the gray coat appeared in 43 different services, always in the background, always distant from the main mourning group, always the same coat, the same face, the same age. I went back further, 10 years, 12 years, 15 years. She was in every photograph where background mourners were visible. I started calling other funeral homes in Richmond, asked if any of their longtime staff recognized a woman matching her description gray coat, always in the back, never signs the guest book. 3 funeral directors confirmed they'd seen her. One had worked in the industry for 29 years. Oh, the woman in gray, he said. Yeah, I've seen her at hundreds of funerals. I always assumed she was grief support or something. Never asked, do you know her name? Never spoken to her. She's just always there. That evening, I went back to the Henderson service photographs, studied the 1962 image Patricia had shown me. The woman in the gray coat stood in the same position relative to the main mourners as she always did, back and to the left, far enough to be respectful, close enough to witness. The photograph was 62 years old. The woman hadn't aged a day. I made a decision I'd been avoiding. The next funeral was scheduled for Thursday, a young man named Thomas Chen, 37. Sudden cardiac event. I arrived early, set up the chapel, and positioned myself where I could watch the entrance. The woman in the gray coat arrived 20 minutes before the service. Excuse me, ma'am, I'm Marcus, the funeral attendant here. I was wondering if I could ask you a question. She looked at me. Her eyes were kind but distant, like someone looking at you from very far away. Yes? I've noticed you attend many services here. Are you with a grief support organization, or I'm here to pay respects? She said quietly. Did you know Mr. Chen? No. Then, if you don't mind me asking why, I knew his sister. Something in the way she said it made me pause. His sister passed away 8 years ago. Were you at her funeral? Yes. You must have a remarkable memory to remember someone from 8 years ago. I remember everyone, she said simply. The service started. She took her usual seat. I stood at the back, watching her instead of the proceedings. After the service, I approached Patricia Henderson, Margaret's daughter, asked if I could borrow that 1962 photograph to make a copy for our historical archives. She agreed. I took it to a photo restoration specialist and asked them to enhance and enlarge the woman in the gray coat. The enhanced image showed details I hadn't noticed: the coat's fabric, the buttons, the cut, and around her neck, barely visible, a small pendant. I'd seen that pendant before, just once. 3 months ago, at a service for an elderly woman named Doris Whitfield. Doris's daughter had shown me a photograph from 1947, her mother's wedding day. In the background of that photograph, among the guests, stood a woman in a gray coat with a small pendant. I pulled the Whitfield file, compared the two photographs. Same woman, same coat, same pendant, 77 years apart. That weekend, I visited Oakwood Cemetery, where many of Richmond's old families are buried. I walked through the sections dating back to the early 1900s, reading headstones, looking for anything that might explain what I was seeing. In the oldest section, beneath a magnolia tree, I found a grave marker worn almost smooth by a century of weather. I could barely make out the inscription, Elizabeth Gray, 1889 to 1924. Beloved sister, she mourns with those who mourn. Below that, an additional line, interred in the coat she wore to her sister's funeral. I stood there for a long time, reading and rereading those words. She mourns with those who mourn. The next funeral was scheduled for Monday. I arrived early, set up the chapel, positioned myself at the entrance. The woman in the gray coat arrived exactly 20 minutes before the service, as she always did. This time, I didn't ask questions. I just said, "Thank you for coming." She looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time in 16 years, she smiled. "You're welcome, Marcus." She knew my name. I'd never told her my name. The service proceeded. She sat in her usual spot. Afterward, she left quietly, as always, but this time, I followed her at a distance. She walked 3 blocks to Oakwood Cemetery, entered through the main gate, walked directly to the oldest section, to the magnolia tree, to the grave of Elizabeth Gray. She stood there for maybe 2 minutes, her hand resting on the weathered headstone. Then she faded. Not dramatically, not like something from a film, just a gradual dissolution, like morning mist when the sun rises. The gray coat was the last thing to disappear. I haven't seen her since. But yesterday, I worked a funeral for a woman named Sarah Martinez. As the family was leaving, Sarah's daughter stopped me. "Thank you for everything, Marcus, and please thank that woman in the gray coat who sat in the back. I didn't recognize her, but it meant so much to see her there. My mother would have appreciated knowing someone cared enough to attend." I looked at the back of the chapel, empty. I checked the security footage from the service. No woman in a gray coat anywhere in the recording. But Sarah's daughter saw her, and she was grateful. This morning, I found a small card tucked into the guest book for next week's service. No envelope, no signature, just 5 words in elegant handwriting. She mourns with those who mourn. I keep that card in my desk now, and when I work funerals, I always look for her in the back row, left side, 3 rows from the rear. Sometimes I see her, sometimes I don't, but I know she's there, keeping her vigil, mourning with those who mourn for 100 years and maybe 100 more. Some sections of a cemetery are closed for reasons that have nothing to do with capacity, and the iron gate at Pinewood has been locked since before I was born. My name is Theodore Ashton, and I have worked as head groundskeeper at Pinewood Cemetery in Bangor, Maine for 31 years. I maintain every acre of these grounds, mow the grass, trim the hedges, repair sinking plots, clear fallen branches. I know every section, every pathway, every corner of this place, except one. The old section behind the iron gate. It's been sealed since 1953, according to the cemetery records. A wrought iron gate, maybe 8 feet tall, set into a stone wall that separates the oldest part of Pinewood from the maintained grounds. The gate is locked with a chain that's rusted solid, and the area beyond has gone wild, overgrown with brush, saplings pushing up between old headstones, nature reclaiming what we abandoned. I asked about it once, early in my career. The superintendent at the time, a man named Douglas Kerr, just shook his head. That section's closed, Theo. Has been for 70 years. We don't maintain it. We don't go in there. Leave it alone. But why? What happened? Before my time. Before anyone's time who still works here. Just leave it. I did. For 31 years, I walked past that iron gate maybe 3 times a week and never questioned it. The lock was solid. The gate was immovable. Whatever was behind it wasn't my concern. Until 2 weeks ago, when I arrived for my early morning rounds and found the gate open, not broken, not forced, just open. The chain lay on the ground, still locked, the metal links intact. But the gate stood wide, swinging slightly in the October breeze, as if someone had simply lifted the chain off and walked through. I called the current superintendent, Rachel Morris, immediately. The old section's open, gate standing wide. That's impossible. The chain's still locked. It's just not on the gate anymore. She arrived 20 minutes later. We stood together, looking at that open gate and the darkness beyond it. Could have been vandals, Rachel said, but her voice was uncertain. Kids trying to prove they're brave. The lock wasn't cut, wasn't broken. It was removed intact. She picked up the chain, examining the rusted padlock, still secured, still functional, just no longer attached to anything. We need to check inside, make sure nothing's been disturbed. I didn't want to. Something about that open gate felt wrong, not like an invitation, but like a warning we were choosing to ignore. But Rachel was already pushing through the overgrowth, and I followed. The old section was smaller than I'd expected. Maybe 40 graves, most of them dating from the 1880s through the early 1900s. The headstones were weathered, some tilted, some broken. Weeds and wild grass grew knee-high. An old oak tree dominated the center, its branches creating a canopy that blocked most of the morning light. Everything looked undisturbed, old, forgotten. Exactly as you'd expect from a section sealed for 7 decades, except for one grave. Near the back, beneath the oak tree's shadow, one plot showed disturbed earth. Not freshly dug, the grass had grown back but sunken. The ground had collapsed inward, leaving a depression maybe 2 feet deep and roughly coffin-shaped. Rachel knelt beside it. The earth settled, like something underneath gave way. Or something got out, I said quietly. She looked at me. That's not how it works, Theo. Then explain the depression. Explain why it's coffin-shaped. Explain why the gate was open this morning. She couldn't. We checked the headstone. Most of the engraving had worn away, but I could still make out a name. Samuel Whitten, died 1907. Rachel pulled out her phone and searched our digital records. No record of a Samuel Whitten. Actually, we don't have records for any of the graves in this section. Everything before 1953 was never digitized. Why not? I don't know. Budget constraints? Lost paperwork? She stood up, brushing dirt from her knees. I'll contact the Historical Society, see if they have information about this section. In the meantime, we close the gate and get a new chain. We left the old section and secured the gate with a new padlock. Heavier chain, better lock. I tested it twice before we left. The next morning, the gate was open again. Same situation. Chain on the ground, lock intact, gate standing wide, and the sunken grave had deepened. Now maybe 3 feet down, the depression more pronounced, the edges sharper. Something's digging, Rachel said. Animal, probably. Fox or coyote making a den. But we both knew animals don't remove locked chains from gates. I volunteered to stay overnight, set up a camera pointed at the iron gate from a concealed position about 50 yards away. If something was opening that gate, I wanted to know what. The camera recorded from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 8 hours of footage. At 3:22 a.m., the gate moved. No person visible, no animal, no explanation. The gate simply swung open, slow and deliberate, as if pushed by an invisible hand. At 3:23 a.m., something moved in the darkness beyond the gate, not walking out, moving deeper in, a shadow without a source, darker than the surrounding night, heading toward the back of the old section, toward the sunken grave. At 3:41 a.m., the shadow returned, passed through the gate, disappeared into the cemetery grounds. At 3:42 a.m., the gate swung closed. I watched that footage maybe 20 times, showed it to Rachel. She watched it in silence. "We need to fill in that grave," she said finally. "Compact the earth, make it stable. Whatever's causing this, we stop it by fixing the structural issue." The next day, we brought equipment, a full crew. We were going to excavate the sunken area, determine what had caused the collapse, and properly fill and compact the earth. We dug down 4 feet before we hit the casket, or what was left of it. The wood had rotted through in several places, exposing the interior. Empty, no remains, no clothing, no artifacts, just empty space and dirt that had filtered through the collapsed wood. "Grave robbery?" one of the crew suggested. "Someone dug him up years ago?" But there was no evidence of disturbance from above. The grave had collapsed from within, as if something had pushed its way out from below. We filled the hole, used fresh soil, compacted it in layers, made it solid and stable, restored the surface and reseeded the grass. That night, I checked the camera feed remotely from home. At 3:22 a.m., the gate opened. At 3:23 a.m., the shadow moved into the old section. At 3:41 a.m., it returned. At 3:42 a.m., the gate closed. The next morning, the filled grave showed a new depression, smaller than before, but present. The earth we'd compacted had sunk again, just slightly, right in the center. Rachel made a decision. We seal the entire section, fill it with concrete, make it impossible for anything to disturb. "That's desecration," I said. "It's preservation. Whatever's happening here needs to stop." But before we could begin the work, I received a call from the Maine Historical Society. They'd found records of the old section's closure. The section was sealed in 1953 due to a series of disturbances, the historian told me. Graves showing signs of movement, ground subsidence, several reports of nocturnal activity that the cemetery board couldn't explain. They decided the most respectful course of action was to lock the section and let nature reclaim it. Did they identify which grave was causing the problems? Plot 17, occupied by Samuel Whitten, died 1907. The records note that his grave was the primary source of disturbance, but they couldn't determine why. They tried filling it multiple times. The earth always sank again. What did they finally do? They gave up, locked the gate, walked away. That was 71 years ago. For 71 years, Samuel Whitten has been pushing his way out of the ground, only to return each night. We don't know why. We don't know where he goes. We don't know what he's looking for. But every morning now, I check the gate. Sometimes it's closed, sometimes it's open. The chain never holds. And that grave, no matter how many times we fill it, always sinks again by dawn. Last week, I found footprints in the morning dew, bare feet, leading from the sunken grave, through the gate, across the cemetery grounds, and stopping at a grave in our main section. The grave of Elizabeth Whitten, died 1952, wife of Samuel. The flowers on her headstone, placed by family members who still visit, had been rearranged, moved from the vase to the ground, laid out in a specific pattern I didn't understand. But someone had cared enough to arrange them carefully. Someone who'd been dead for 117 years. I don't try to stop it anymore. Rachel gave up on the concrete plan. We just maintain the rest of the cemetery and leave the old section alone. The gate opens when it wants to, closes when it's ready. And Samuel Whitten walks his nightly path, visiting the wife who died 45 years after him, arranging flowers in patterns only they understand. Some gates stay locked for good reasons. But some locks, no matter how strong, can't hold what refuses to stay buried. I've opened sealed caskets before for families who needed one last moment, but I've never had a widow insist on adding something she already gave. My name is Director Kim Halverson, and I have worked as funeral director at Meadowbrook Funeral Home in Eugene, Oregon for 18 years. Part of my job involves managing those final, difficult moments before burial when families realize they forgot to include something meaningful, or when they need one last look before saying goodbye forever. These requests are common, and I handle them with patience and understanding. Mrs. Patricia Brennan called my cell phone at 6:45 a.m. on the morning of her husband's burial. Director Halverson, I need to see Robert one more time before the service. I forgot to put his watch in the casket. Of course, Mrs. Brennan. I can have the casket opened when you arrive. What time works for you? I'm leaving now. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I arrived at Meadowbrook ahead of her and went directly to the viewing room where Robert Brennan's casket sat, sealed and ready for the 10 a.m. service. I'd prepared Mr. Time, Brennan myself 3 days earlier, a straightforward case, peaceful passing at 74 after a long illness. His wife had been specific about his presentation: navy suit, white shirt, burgundy tie, and his wedding ring. She'd also requested his reading glasses be placed in his jacket pocket. I unlocked the casket's seal mechanism and carefully opened the lid. Robert Brennan lay exactly as I'd positioned him, hands folded across his chest, wedding ring visible on his left hand, reading glasses in his jacket pocket. Everything proper and dignified. Mrs. Brennan arrived 15 minutes later, slightly out of breath, clutching her purse. Thank you for doing this. I know it's unusual, but Robert never went anywhere without his watch. I can't believe I forgot. She opened her purse and reached inside, then stopped. Her face went pale. What's wrong? I asked. She pulled out her hand empty and stared into the casket, specifically at her husband's left wrist. I followed her gaze. Robert Brennan was wearing a watch, a gold wristwatch with a leather band positioned on his left wrist beneath his folded hands. That's impossible, Mrs. Brennan whispered. I'm sorry. I don't understand. I have his watch. She reached into her purse again and pulled out an identical gold watch. Same style, same leather band, same slight wear pattern on the clasp. I stared at the watch in her hand, then at the watch on her husband's wrist. Two identical watches. Mrs. Brennan, when did you last see your husband wearing his watch? The night before he died. He took it off before bed, like he always did, put it on his nightstand. After he passed, I kept it. I've been carrying it with me every day. She held up the watch in her hand. This is Robert's watch. I'm absolutely certain. Then the watch on his wrist. Shouldn't be there. Her voice was shaking now. Director Halverson, I was there when you dressed him. I watched you position his hands. There was no watch on his wrist. I would have noticed. She was right. I remembered the preparation clearly. I dressed Robert Brennan myself, and he had not been wearing a watch. His wife had specifically chosen to keep it as a memento. I'd made a mental note of her decision. May I examine it? I asked. She nodded. I carefully lifted Robert's left hand, stiff with rigor, resistant to movement, and looked at the watch. Gold case, leather band, Roman numerals on the face. The time had stopped at 3:17 a.m. I turned it over. On the back, an engraving. To Robert, with love always, Patricia, 1971. The same engraving Mrs. Brennan had shown me 3 days earlier when she decided to keep the watch, the same year. The same inscription. She leaned forward and showed me the back of the watch she was holding. Identical engraving. Same words, same year. This is impossible, she said again. There's only one watch. Robert wore it for 53 years. I kept it after he died. It's been in my purse this entire time. I had no explanation. I checked the casket seal intact until I'd opened it 15 minutes ago. I checked the security footage from the viewing room no one had entered since I'd sealed the casket 2 days earlier. But somehow, between the time I dressed Robert Brennan and the time his widow arrived to add his watch, the watch had appeared on his wrist. Mrs. Brennan, I need to examine your husband more carefully. Would you mind waiting in the reception area? She left reluctantly, still clutching the watch she'd brought. I checked Robert Brennan's entire presentation. Everything else was exactly as I'd left it. Suit properly fitted, tie straight, hands positioned correctly, reading glasses in the pocket. But the watch on his wrist hadn't been there 2 days ago. I was certain. I took photographs. Documented the time, 3:17 a.m. Stopped, noted the engraving. Then I did something I've never done before. I removed the watch from the deceased. It came off easily. The band unclasped without resistance. I held it in my hand solid, real, unmistakably physical, not a hallucination, not a trick of the light, a real watch. I placed it on the table beside the casket and called Mrs. Brennan back in. Is this your husband's watch? I asked, showing her the one I'd removed. She examined it carefully. Yes. I mean, it looks exactly like it, but I have his watch right here. She held up the one from her purse. We placed both watches side by side on the table. Identical. Gold case, leather band, Roman numerals, same engraving, same wear patterns. Even the stop time was the same. 3:17 a.m. Director Halverson, what's happening? I had no answer. I've prepared hundreds of bodies. I've handled countless personal effects. I've managed every kind of unusual request and strange situation that can occur in this profession. But I've never had a dead man wearing something I specifically didn't put on him, something that was simultaneously in his widow's possession. Mrs. Brennan sat down, both watches in her hands now. 3:17. That's when he died. I was there. The hospice nurse noted the time. 3:17 a.m. The watch on his wrist had stopped at the exact moment of his death, but the watch in Mrs. Brennan's purse had also stopped at 3:17 a.m., She'd confirmed that detail days ago. 2 watches, same moment, same stop time. Would you like me to leave the watch on? I asked quietly. Or would you prefer I remove it? She stared at both watches for a long time. Then, carefully, she placed one back in her purse and handed me the other. Put it back on him. If Robert's wearing it somehow, he should keep it. I placed the watch back on his left wrist, positioned his hands back over his chest. The watch face showed 3:17 a.m., frozen in the moment between life and death. The funeral proceeded at 10 a.m., open casket, family viewing. Robert Brennan lay in perfect repose, wearing his navy suit and his wedding watch. Mrs. Brennan sat in the front row, occasionally touching her purse where the identical watch rested. After the service, after the burial, after everyone had left, I checked my preparation notes from 3 days earlier. Clear documentation that Robert Brennan had not been wearing a watch when I dressed him. Clear notation that Mrs. Brennan had kept the watch as a memento. But the photographs I'd taken that morning clearly showed a watch on his wrist. And the security footage, when I reviewed it frame by frame, showed something I'd missed. At 3:17 a.m. on the night before the funeral, exactly 72 hours after Robert Brennan's death, the viewing room camera recorded a glitch, 2 seconds of static. Nothing unusual for our old security system, but when the feed cleared, Robert Brennan's left hand had moved just slightly, just enough that the wrist was more visible, and the watch was there. I've reviewed that footage maybe 50 times. The hand doesn't move during the static. There's no manipulation, just 2 seconds of interference, and when it clears, the watch exists. Mrs. Brennan called me 2 weeks after the funeral. Director Halverson, I need to ask you something. That watch you put back on Robert, I've been thinking about it constantly. I still have his watch in my purse, but I keep wondering if the one he's wearing is somehow more real. Does that make sense? I'm not sure what makes sense about this situation, Mrs. Brennan. I want to visit his grave, but I'm afraid if I go, the watch I'm carrying will disappear. Like it knows there's only supposed to be one, and the one with Robert is the real one. Have you checked recently? Is the watch still in your purse? Silence. Then, I check every day, sometimes multiple times a day. It's always there, but I'm terrified. One morning I'll look, and it'll be gone. I didn't know what to tell her. 3 months later, Mrs. Brennan passed away. Heart failure, sudden and unexpected. Her daughter contacted me to arrange the funeral. We're burying her next to Dad at Willowbrook, and Director Halverson, there's something she wanted. She left very specific instructions. She wanted to be buried wearing Dad's watch. The watch from her purse? Yes. She kept it with her every day, never took it out. She said it was the only thing she wanted to wear in the casket. I prepared Mrs. Brennan with the same care I'd given her husband, and I placed the gold watch on her left wrist, fastening the leather band carefully. The time was still stopped at 3:17 a.m. At the funeral, as her casket was being closed, I took one last look. The watch was gone. Her wrist was bare. I checked the casket lining, the floor, my preparation room, searched everywhere. The watch had simply vanished. Her daughter noticed. Where's the watch? She was supposed to be buried with it. I had no answer. That night, I drove to Willowbrook Cemetery, found Robert Brennan's grave in the moonlight, and in front of the stone, placed carefully on the grass, was a gold watch with a leather band. Both of them, 2 identical watches, side by side, Both stopped at 3:17 a.m. I left them there because some things belong together, even in death, especially in death. I've recorded hundreds of memorial services for families who want to preserve the memory, but only one recording showed someone who shouldn't exist. My name is Omar Reyes, and I have worked as audio-visual technician at Riverside Memorial Chapel in Portland, Oregon for 13 years. My job is straightforward: set up cameras for services, record the proceedings, edit the footage, and provide families with a professional video they can keep. It's technical work, but it requires sensitivity. I'm capturing some of the most painful moments of people's lives, and I treat that responsibility seriously. The service for Margaret Chen was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon in early November. Standard memorial, open casket viewing, eulogies from family members, music selections, approximately 90 minutes total. Mrs. Chen's daughter, Susan, had requested a full recording of the service to share with relatives who couldn't attend. I arrived 2 hours early to set up. 3 cameras, one at the back of the chapel for a wide shot of the entire room, one at the side for profile views of the speakers, and one near the front focused on the casket and podium. All 3 feed into my mixing board, where I can switch between angles and create a professional edit. The service began at 2 p.m. Approximately 70 guests attended. Family filled the front rows, friends and colleagues scattered throughout the middle, a few people I didn't recognize toward the back. Normal attendance for a well-loved woman who'd passed at 79. I monitored the recording from my station in the small technical booth at the rear of the chapel. Everything proceeded smoothly. After the service, after the guests had left, after the family had said their final goodbyes and Mrs. Chen had been transported to the cemetery, I began the editing process. I always review the full recording before editing, check for audio issues, camera glitches, moments that might need special attention. I was maybe 20 minutes into the footage when I noticed something in the background of the wide-angle shot. During the second eulogy, while Susan Chen was speaking at the podium, a figure sat alone in the last pew, left side, far back, separate from the other mourners. I couldn't make out details from the wide shot, so I switched to the side camera angle. From that perspective, I could see the figure more clearly. A woman, elderly, gray hair, wearing dark clothing, sitting very still, hands folded in her lap, watching the service. I didn't remember seeing her during the actual service. I'd been monitoring the cameras, scanning the crowd periodically to ensure good coverage. I would have noticed someone sitting alone in the back, but there she was on the recording, clear as day, definitely present. I switched back to the wide angle and watched the rest of the service. The woman remained seated throughout, never moved, never stood for the hymns, never approached the casket during the viewing portion, just sat there, watching. At the end of the service, when guests began to leave, I lost sight of her in the crowd. By the time the chapel had emptied, she was gone. I checked the sign-in book, the guest register, where attendees write their names, 73 signatures. I counted the people visible in my footage, 74 individuals, 1 extra person. The woman in the back. I zoomed in on the clearest shot of her face. The resolution was good enough to see her features, probably in her 80s, thin, with prominent cheekbones and deep-set eyes. Something about her expression was odd. Not sad exactly, more distant, like she was watching the service from somewhere very far away. I made a note to ask Susan Chen if she recognized the woman, then continued with the edit. 2 days later, I delivered the finished recording to Susan. She was pleased with the work I'd captured, all the important moments. The audio was clean, the transitions were smooth. Before you go, I said, I wanted to ask about one of the attendees. There was a woman sitting alone in the back pew during the service. Elderly, gray hair. I didn't get her name from the sign-in book. Susan looked confused. I don't think there was anyone sitting alone in the back. All of Mom's friends sat together in the middle section. Would you mind checking the footage? I can show you exactly where she was. I pulled up the recording on my laptop and navigated to the second eulogy, pointed to the figure in the back pew. Susan leaned in, studying the image. Her face went pale. That's impossible. Do you know her? That's my grandmother, Mom's mother, Eleanor Chen. I didn't realize she'd attended. Should I make sure she's featured in the Omar? My grandmother died in 1998. I was 16. I have pictures of her funeral. I stared at the screen. The woman sat perfectly still in the back pew, clear and visible in my recording. Are you sure? Maybe it's someone who looks similar. Susan pulled out her phone and showed me a photograph. An elderly woman, probably in her 70s, smiling at the camera. Same face, same bone structure, same features as the woman in my recording. That's my grandmother Eleanor, taken in 1996. She died 2 years later. Susan's hand was shaking as she held the phone. Why is she in the video? I had no answer. We watched the entire service together, tracking the woman's presence. She appeared in the background of multiple shots, always in the same position, always motionless. At the end, when guests began to leave, she simply wasn't there anymore. No footage of her standing, no footage of her walking out. She was present, and then she wasn't. Could it be a technical glitch? Susan asked. Some kind of video artifact? Not like this. Video artifacts don't create fully formed human figures, and they don't appear consistently across multiple camera angles. I pulled up the side camera footage. The same woman, visible from a different perspective. 3 separate cameras. Susan. She's in all of them. Then how? I don't know. Susan asked me to check the sign-in book one more time. I pulled it from our files, and we went through every signature. 73 names. I pointed out each person in the video footage, matching names to faces. 73 signatures. 74 people. The extra person was Eleanor Chen. I need to show this to my sister, Susan said quietly. And my father. They need to see this. Over the next week, I received calls from 3 members of the Chen family. All of them confirmed the same thing. The woman in the video was Eleanor Chen, who had died 26 years earlier. All of them wanted copies of the footage showing her. I provided the recordings, but kept my own copy. Started going through my archive of previous services, looking for anything similar. I found her in 4 other recordings. Different services, different families, different dates spanning the past 8 months. Always in the back, always alone, always watching silently. And in each case, when I contacted the families and showed them the enhanced footage, they identified her as a deceased relative. For the Morrison service in March, they identified her as Margaret Morrison, the deceased's mother, died 2007. For the Patterson service in June, they identified her as Helen Patterson, the deceased's sister, died 1998. For the Washington service in August, they identified her as Ruth Washington, the deceased's grandmother, died 2001. Each time, the families were certain. Each time, the woman was someone who had died years earlier. Each time, she sat in the same place, back pew, left side, alone, but her appearance changed. For the Chen service, she looked like Eleanor Chen. For the Morrison service, she looked like Margaret Morrison. Different faces, different ages, different features. The same position, the same stillness, the same distant expression. I started checking the sign-in book at every service I recorded, started counting attendees manually, and I found the pattern. Every service had one extra person, one individual visible in the footage who hadn't signed the guest book, always in the back, always alone, always someone who died years before. Last week, I recorded a service for Thomas Winters, a 47-year-old father of three who died in a car accident. Tragic, sudden. The chapel was packed with grieving family and friends. I counted 92 people in attendance, 91 signatures in the guest book. When I reviewed the footage, I found her. Back pew, left side, alone. But this time, she wasn't an elderly woman. She was young, maybe mid-20s, dark hair, thin build, wearing what looked like 1970s style clothing. I enhanced the image and sent it to the Winters family with my usual question, "Do you recognize this attendee?" Thomas Winters' widow called me that evening, crying. "That's Angela, Thomas's first love. They dated in high school. She died in a car accident when they were both 24. Thomas never really got over it. Did she sign the guest book?" Omar, Angela died in 1999. She's been gone for 25 years. I've started keeping a log. Every service, every extra attendee, every impossible mourner. In the past 13 months, I've recorded 47 memorial services, 47 extra signatures in my footage, 47 people who shouldn't exist attending funerals for people they knew. I don't know how they appear. I don't know why my cameras capture them when no one else sees them. I don't know if they're actually there in the chapel or if they exist in some space between recorded time and real time. But they attend, they witness, they sit quietly in the back and watch as the people they loved are remembered and mourned. This morning, I'm setting up for another service, another family, another recording, and I know when I review the footage tonight, I'll find one more mourner than sign the guest book. I'll find someone sitting alone in the back pew, someone who died years ago but came back to say goodbye one more time. The cameras see them, the recording captures them, and the families, when they view the footage, recognize the faces of the people they've lost. I don't try to explain it anymore. I just document it, record it, preserve it, because maybe that's what they need. Maybe that's why they appear. One final moment, one last service, one more chance to sit in the back and witness the grief of the people they left behind. I check my cameras one more time, adjust the angles, test the audio, and I wait to see who will attend today's service, who will sit in the back pew, left side, alone, who will watch from the place between life and death, visible only to my cameras, present only in the recording. They always come. They always have one extra chair, and I always capture them on tape. Some family crypts hold secrets that die with the last person who knew the truth, and beneath the oak tree at Ridgewood, I found one that should have stayed buried. My name is Renata Vasquez, and I have worked as cemetery archivist and historian at Ridgewood Memorial Gardens in Asheville, North Carolina for 22 years. My responsibilities include maintaining burial records, researching family histories, and occasionally assisting with the opening of old family crypts when descendants need access. its scholarly work most of the time quiet, methodical, rooted in documentation and respect for the past. The Thornhill family crypt had been sealed since 1934. 90 years of undisturbed rest beneath a massive oak tree that had stood on the property since before Ridgewood became a cemetery. The oak was a landmark, maybe 200 years old, its canopy so dense that grass barely grew beneath it. In September, I received a request from Margaret Thornhill Watson, a descendant of the original family. Our records showed 7 burials between 1912 and 1934, but Margaret had found conflicting information in family documents. "I just need to see inside," she explained during our phone call. "Make sure the crypt matches what the records say. My research suggests there might be 8 burials, not 7. I pulled the Thornhill files and reviewed the documentation. 7 crypts, 7 recorded burials, 7 names, 7 dates, all properly documented. But Margaret was insistent, and she had the legal authority as a direct descendant to request access. The cemetery superintendent, Daniel Morris, and I met Margaret at the crypt on a Tuesday morning. The structure was beautiful granite construction, ornate iron door, the Thornhill name carved above the entrance. Ivy had grown over parts of the stone, and the oak's roots had created gentle rises in the earth around the foundation. Daniel had to use bolt cutters on the lock. The chain had rusted solid over 9 decades. When the door finally opened, the smell of old air and stone flooded out, not decay, just age and darkness. I stepped inside with my flashlight. The interior was larger than I'd expected. 8 crypts arranged around the walls, 2 on each of 3 walls, and 2 more flanking the entrance. 8 crypts, not 7. I counted again to be sure, then checked my documentation. The records showed 7 burials, 7 names, 7 dates, but there were 8 sealed marble faces in the crypt walls, and 7 of them bore engraved nameplates. Edward Thornhill, 1847 to 1912. Catherine Thornhill, 1852 to 1918. William Thornhill, 1872 to 1919. Sarah Thornhill, 1875 to 1922. Elizabeth Thornhill, 1898 to 1929. James Thornhill, 1901 to 1931. Margaret Thornhill, 1904 to 1934. The 8th crypt, positioned in the center of the back wall, had no nameplate, no engraving, no identification, just sealed marble, identical to the others in every way except for the absence of a name. And the arrangement was wrong. The 7 named crypts formed a circle around the 8th. Not a traditional pattern family, crypts usually place the eldest in positions of honor, with children and spouses arranged by status and date of death. But here, the crypts were positioned to face inward, toward the center, toward the unnamed 8th crypt. Margaret noticed it too. "That's strange. Why would they all face that way?" Daniel shined his flashlight on the floor. "And look at this." The marble floor showed a pattern I'd missed at first glance. 7 sets of initials carved into the stone, each positioned directly in front of one of the named crypts. E, T, C, T in front of Catherine, W T in front of William, S T, E T in front of Elizabeth, J T in front of James, M T in front of Margaret, and in the center of the floor, directly in front of the unmarked crypt, a single word carved deep into the marble, forgive. This is highly unusual, I said quietly. I've never seen a family crypt arranged this way, and we have no record of an eighth burial. Margaret pulled out her phone and photographed everything. My great-grandmother's diary mentioned something about this. She wrote that the Thornhill family had a secret and that it died with Margaret Thornhill in 1934. I always assumed it was just family drama, but now we should document this and seal the crypt back up, Daniel said. If there's an unrecorded burial, that's a legal issue. We need to wait, I said. Look at the center crypt, the seal. The marble face covering the eighth crypt showed cracks. Not damage from age, deliberate cracks, like someone had started to break through the seal and then stopped. The fractures radiated from a central point at roughly head height. Someone tried to open this, Margaret whispered. I examined the other crypts, all perfectly sealed. Only the unnamed center crypt showed any damage. I need to check something, I said. I pulled up our historical records on my tablet and searched for any mentions of disturbances at the Thornhill crypt. Found one entry dated August 1934, written by the cemetery superintendent at the time. Thornhill crypt investigated following complaint of noise. Found locked and secure. No evidence of disturbance. Informed family no further action required. August 1934. 1 month after Margaret Thornhill, the last family member, had been buried there. What kind of noise? Margaret asked. The record doesn't specify. But if they investigated the crypt and found it secure, why would someone later try to break the center seal? We stood in silence, our flashlights illuminating the word carved in the floor. Forgive. I want it opened, Margaret said suddenly. The center crypt. Daniel shook his head. That requires permits, notifications. If there's an unrecorded burial, then we record it now. 90 years late, but we record it. It took 3 days to arrange the permits and hire a mason who specialized in historic crypt work. On Friday morning, we returned to the Thornhill crypt with equipment and witnesses, Daniel, Margaret, myself, the mason, and a county official to document any findings. The mason worked carefully, removing the cracked marble face piece by piece. Behind it, as expected, we found a casket, small, child-sized, dark wood, simply constructed, no nameplate, no engraving, no identification. That's a child's coffin, the county official said quietly. The mason cleared the rest of the opening. The casket rested on a stone shelf, positioned exactly like the others, but something was wrong with it. The lid wasn't fully closed. A gap of maybe 2 inches showed along one edge, as if the casket had been sealed improperly or had shifted over time. Should we open it? Margaret asked. We need to document what's inside, the county official said. Identify the remains. Determine if this was a legal burial. The mason lifted the lid carefully. Inside, we found a child's shoe, patent leather, sized for a toddler, placed carefully on white satin lining. No body, no remains, no clothing, no bones, just one small black shoe. And beneath it, a piece of paper, folded once. I took photographs before touching anything. Then, wearing gloves, I carefully unfolded the paper. The handwriting was shaky, hurried, dated July 1934. To whoever finds this, we did what we thought was right. The child was born wrong, died wrong. We couldn't mark the grave with a name because the child had no name. We sealed it here because the family cannot speak of it. 7 of us know the truth. 7 of us will take the truth to our graves. Forgive us. M.T. M.T. Margaret Thornhill, the last family member buried in this crypt. What does that mean? Born wrong, Daniel asked. I checked the records on my tablet. Margaret Thornhill had died in July 1934, age 30. Cause of death listed as childbirth complications. She died having a baby, I said quietly, and the baby was buried here. Margaret Thornhill Watson finished, without a name, without acknowledgement, and the 7 family members positioned their crypts to face it, to watch it, the county official said, or to contain it. We stood around that open crypt for a long time, looking at that single shoe and that confession written 90 years ago. The county official required we document everything, then reseal the crypt. The shoe would remain, the note would be archived. The unnamed child would stay in the center, surrounded by 7 family members who'd taken the truth to their graves. But before the masons sealed it again, I noticed something else. Inside the casket, carved into the wood beneath where the shoe had rested, was a single word, Mother, not carved by an adult. The letters were shallow, uneven, like someone with very small hands had scratched them there with something sharp. The mason saw it too. So did Margaret. None of us said anything. We sealed the crypt that afternoon. Margaret authorized a small marker for the records. Unknown infant, Thornhill family, died 1934. But we all knew it wasn't unknown. Margaret Thornhill had known, had written that note, had arranged to be buried in a position facing her child, and the child had carved one word before it was sealed in darkness. Mother. I've researched extensively since that day, found no birth records, no death certificate, no documentation of any kind for a Thornhill infant in 1934. Just that single shoe, that confession, that word carved in the dark. Last week, the groundskeeper reported hearing sounds near the oak tree. Faint crying, he said, like a child. He checked the entire area, found nothing, but I checked the date of his report. July 19th, 90 years to the day after Margaret Thornhill died, the day an unnamed child was sealed in a crypt with only a shoe and a word. Mother. Some crypts hold bodies, some hold secrets, and some hold both, sealed in darkness, surrounded by family members who couldn't speak the truth even in death. The Thornhill crypt is locked again. The oak tree stands guard. And beneath it, in the center of 7 watching crypts, something unnamed still waits, still calls, still scratches words in the dark that no one will ever read. I've prepared thousands of bodies for viewing, but only one ever spoke to me, and what it said changed everything I thought I knew about the moment between life and death. My name is Cole Manning, and I have worked as night attendant at Clearwater Funeral Home in Spokane, Washington for 9 years. My shift runs from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., maintaining the facility when the day staff has gone home. Most nights are quiet. I check the climate control systems, monitor security, ensure the bodies in our preparation rooms and viewing rooms remain undisturbed. It's solitary work, but I've never minded. The dead are peaceful company. On a Wednesday night in late October, I was setting up for a morning viewing. The deceased was Mr. Richard Hartley, a 62-year-old construction supervisor who died suddenly of a heart attack 3 days earlier. His funeral director, Sarah Morrison, had prepared him that afternoon, and I was tasked with the final details, adjusting the lights, arranging flowers, ensuring everything was perfect for the family's 8 a.m. arrival. I entered the viewing room at 11:45 p.m. Mr. Hartley lay in repose in a dark walnut casket, dressed in a charcoal suit, hands folded across his chest. Sarah had done excellent work. His color looked natural, his expression peaceful. Nothing suggested the violence of a sudden cardiac death. I adjusted the overhead lighting, softening the harsh fluorescence to something more flattering. Straightened the flowers his wife had sent, white roses and blue hydrangeas. Checked the temperature, precisely 68 degrees, optimal for preservation and family comfort. As I was positioning the guest book on its stand, I heard something, a single word, barely audible, more breath than voice. Wait. I froze. The building was empty. I'd locked the doors myself. The security system showed no breaches. Wait. The word came again. Same volume, same breathless quality. From the casket. My training kicked in, immediately check for equipment malfunction, ensure the body hasn't shifted, verify rigor hasn't caused facial changes that might create acoustic illusions. Bodies don't speak. Dead tissue doesn't produce sound. What I was hearing was probably the building settling, pipes expanding, my own exhaustion creating auditory hallucinations. I approached the casket slowly, professionally, ready to confirm that everything was exactly as it should be. Mr. Hartley looked unchanged. Same position, same peaceful expression, same folded hands. But as I stood there, watching for any sign of movement, I heard it again. Wait. The word came from him. I saw his lips move, just slightly, just enough to form the sound. I stepped back. My heart was pounding, but my training held. Bodies sometimes release gas, sometimes vocal cords spasm, sometimes the diaphragm expels air, creating sound that resembles speech. It's rare, but it happens. I pulled out my phone and called Sarah Morrison. She answered groggily. Cole, what's wrong? I'm in the viewing room with Mr. Hartley. I need you to verify something about his preparation. Did you notice any unusual muscular tension? Any issues with rigor? No. Standard prep. Why? I'm hearing sounds. Silence. Then, what kind of sounds? Speech. The word wait. 3 times now. Cole, bodies don't. I know. But I'm hearing it. I need you to confirm. Was he completely deceased when you received him? Any possibility of misdiagnosis? He'd been dead for 48 hours when we got him from the coroner. Completely deceased, full rigor, beginning decomposition. There's no possibility. The word came again, louder this time, clear enough that I was certain Sarah would hear it through the phone. Wait, did you hear that? I asked. Hear what? He just said it again. Cole, I'm coming down there. Don't touch anything. She arrived 30 minutes later. We stood together by the casket, watching Mr. Hartley's still form. Nothing. Complete silence. No movement. No sound. I heard it. I insisted. 4 times. The word wait. Sarah checked everything: body temperature, rigor status, positioning, facial muscles, all normal, all consistent with 3 days post-mortem. I believe you heard something, she said carefully, but there's a rational explanation. gas release, building acoustics, stress. You've been working nights for 9 years. Fatigue can create weight. We both heard it that time. Sarah's face went pale. She leaned closer to the casket, examining Mr. Hartley's face. His lips didn't move, she said. I was watching. They didn't move. But we'd both heard it. Clear, distinct. That single word, we need to verify he's actually deceased, I said. Cole, I embalmed him. Then how is he speaking? Neither of us had an answer. Sarah pulled out her phone and checked the intake records. The coroner pronounced him dead at the scene. Heart attack, witnessed by his co-worker. Paramedics confirmed. He was dead for at least 20 minutes before they transported him. What were his last words? Before the heart attack? Sarah scrolled through the documentation. The witness statement says he was talking to his daughter on the phone. She just told him something important, and he said, she stopped. What? He said, wait. His daughter told him she was pregnant, and he said, wait, say that again, and then he collapsed. The word echoed in the quiet viewing room, wait. He was asking his daughter to repeat the news, Sarah said quietly. He never got to hear her say it again. We stood there in the silence, both of us watching the body that should not be speaking. Wait. This time, the word was followed by something else. Not another word, just a sound. A soft exhalation, like someone releasing a long-held breath. Sarah checked her phone again. The funeral is at 8 a.m. The daughter Amanda will be here then. She's speaking first, reading a eulogy. Does she mention the pregnancy? I don't know. But Sarah looked at me. What if he's not asking us to wait? What if he's still trying to hear what she said? We made a decision that probably violated every protocol in our profession. Sarah called Amanda Hartley. It was 12:40 a.m. Amanda answered on the fourth ring, confused and worried. Miss Hartley, I apologize for calling so late. This is Sarah Morrison from Clearwater Funeral Home. I need to ask you something about your father's last moments. Is something wrong? No, everything's fine. The witness report says you told your father something important right before he collapsed. About being pregnant? Yes. I just found out that morning. He was so excited when I started to tell him. But then, her voice broke. He asked me to wait, to say it again, because he couldn't believe it. But I didn't get to tell him again. He just fell. Miss Hartley, would you be willing to come to the funeral home tonight? Now? There's something I can't explain it, but I think your father might need to hear you say it again. What? I don't understand. Please, I know it sounds impossible, but please trust me. Amanda arrived 25 minutes later. We'd explained nothing on the phone, just asked her to come. She stood in the viewing room doorway, looking at her father's casket with confusion and grief. What's this about? She asked. Your father's been speaking, I said quietly. The word wait. The same word he said to you on the phone. That's impossible, we know. But we've both heard it multiple times, and we think he's still waiting to hear what you were going to tell him. Amanda looked at us like we were crazy. Then she looked at her father. Dad? Silence. Dad, it's Amanda. I'm here. Nothing. I'm going to tell you again. What I tried to tell you on the phone. Before she stepped closer to the casket, her voice shaking. Dad, I'm pregnant. You're going to be a grandfather. That's what I was trying to tell you. The silence stretched. Sarah and I held our breath. Then, so softly we almost missed it. Congratulations, Amanda gasped. Sarah grabbed my arm. Not wait. A different word. A complete word. Congratulations. Amanda sank into the chair beside the casket, crying. Not grief this time, something else. Relief, maybe. Or completion. Thank you, Dad, she whispered. Thank you. We stayed with her for another hour. She talked to her father, told him about the pregnancy, about her plans, about how much she wished he could be there to meet the baby. And we listened, standing quietly in the back of the viewing room, witnesses to a conversation that shouldn't exist. The voice didn't come again, just that once, just congratulations, just enough to finish what he'd started on the phone. At 2 a.m., Amanda left, thanked us, said she didn't understand what had happened but knew it was real. Sarah and I remained in the viewing room until dawn, watched, listened, waiting for another word that never came. The funeral proceeded normally at 8 a.m. Amanda delivered her eulogy, which included the news of her pregnancy and her father's final word, not wait, but congratulations, spoken hours after his death in a funeral home viewing room. Some family members cried. Some looked confused. None of them questioned it. After the burial, after everyone left, Sarah and I sat in the empty chapel. What do we do with this? She asked. Do we report it? Document it? Who would believe us? Amanda believes us. She heard him because she needed to hear him, because he wasn't finished when he died. I still work nights at Clearwater, still set up viewing rooms, still monitor the silent building, still keep company with the dead. But I listen differently now. I pay attention to the final words documented in our intake forms. I notice when families mention unfinished conversations, things left unsaid, moments cut short. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone with the deceased, I give them the space to finish what they started. Most stay silent. Most have said everything they needed to say. But once, 3 months after Richard Hartley, a woman who died mid-sentence during a phone call with her son whispered, I love you, at 2 a.m. while I was adjusting her flowers. And last week, a man who'd collapsed before finishing his wedding vows quietly said, I do, in the empty viewing room at midnight. I don't tell anyone anymore. I just listen, and when they speak, I make sure someone who needs to hear it gets the message. Because sometimes death comes too fast. Sometimes the last word gets cut off. Sometimes people die with something still waiting to be said. And sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, they get one more chance to finish the sentence, one more moment to say what matters, one last word. Wait, I'm listening.